can't even hear me. There we go.
There we go.
Hi. My name is Superfluous, and I am the host of the Atheist Experience. And my name is Matt Dillahunty. Welcome to the show.
I was going to say, do I have to do a pseudonym now?
No, you don't have to. Ladies and gentlemen, Jen Aldrich.
Thank you.
Jen has been a friend of mine for many years, former podcaster, who is now, along with V and Jenna, rebooting Godless Bitches. GB3, the first episode, is going to air immediately after this on the same channel, which means they may try to stop me at a certain time, but they already know they can't.
We're not going down like that.
Yeah. So how are you?
I'm doing great. I had quite a Star Wars-filled week.
Yeah.
Thanks to some people.
Yeah, you're welcome. And that and busyness. There was recording yesterday. Yes. There was recording today. Then you did Talk Heathen.
But Star Wars was the prime. I'd never seen it before. And this guy was like, well, we're going to fix that.
Had never seen anything Star Wars, so we fixed that.
We fixed that.
In like overdose mode.
It was 4, 5, and 6. We did day 1.
Yep.
1, 2, and 3 I did think was day 2.
Yep.
And then day 3 was 7, 8. And then we went to the theater and saw 9.
That's the word.
I am so happy I get all these pop culture references
So now you just need to do Rogue One, Solo,
I have to?
and Mandalorian.
Are these, oh no, not the Mandalorian.
Oh, no, you should. Of the 3, Rogue One is the most important to see.
Okay. I'll try Rogue One. I can't promise Mandalorian.
Welcome to the Atheist Experience. We are live. This is a product of the atheist community of Austin. And on the other side of that wall right there is a group of people who tirelessly devote themselves to making sure that all this stuff can happen. There's our producer, Lord of Levels, our screeners, and wow, there's lots of people in there.
Everyone's hanging out.
Okay. Yeah. And there's tons of announcements. One of them that Mark wanted me to get through, actually there's not tons, but one of them Mark wanted me to get through is to remind people that we stream live on YouTube. And if you're watching live on YouTube, evidently memberships are now available, which will get you custom emotes at certain tiers and stuff like that.
Custom emojis and stuff like that.
So,
tiers,
if you, whether you're already donating on Patreon or you're into, other ways of supporting the atheist community of Austin, that's cool. But if this is something you'd like to do, that's available now too. And yesterday, we had a disaster at the building, ladies and gentlemen.
I can't believe you expect me to work in these conditions.
We have exactly one restroom at our building. It's a small building. It's a good library. Fits the studio. People come in from all over the place. Not enough places to park. We're working on it. Yesterday, our toilet died.
They expect me to work in these conditions. This is not good for the talent. Can't expect us to work in this.
However,
we're striking.
We had a plumber come out and take a look at it. There's somebody coming out on Monday to fix it. And what we did was we immediately called in and got a porta potty put up out on the back thing. So there we go. So now we actually have facilities, and also there's plenty of other places around with facilities, and we're going to wind up with a potentially newer, bigger bathroom. But when we talk about people donating to the show, we thank the patrons, we thank the people who are contributing in many other ways. This is the type of stuff that nobody thinks about.
This is where your money goes, is please help us. Our toilet is broken.
Some of us would like to pee in between shows.
Yes.
But, so we're doing that. We got a bunch of stuff going on. It is a new year. Welcome to 2020.
Welcome to 2020. Is this the first episode of the season for you too, or?
Yes.
I don't know what season this is now because it's been on forever.
24.
Happy 24th.
Is it? I can't read that screen. So Mark will tell me. 24th. Mark has told me I'm correct. So this is 2401.
Congratulations on your 24th season.
Well, it's not my 24th season.
Well, you guys know what I meant. It's 24.
See how easy it is to get her riled up? Wait till we get to callers.
With you, you sitting here,
24 years, the Atheist Experience has been broadcasting in some form or another. Started off not as a live thing, but posted recordings, and we moved on from there. Right. And I've been doing it for almost 15.
Save that joke.
It's become my favorite thing now because we run around I'll run around to conventions and events and people show up, and by the way, all the people who are like, oh, you can't change anybody's mind, that's a load of crap. Happens all the time. We get tons of email from people. I can't go to any event without having several people come up and say, hey, what you guys did on the show helped make me a skeptic or a better skeptic, or help get me out of fundamentalist view.
I've had people change their minds on. I deal with more activism and just like socioeconomic, race relations. And I've had people come to me after my old show and been like, I never thought of things this way, and thank you for really kind of piecing it out for me.
Yep.
And that's what keeps us doing what we do.
So it works, and we hear about it. And when we talk about hey, the donations, keep it. We had to get a porta potty,
right?
Because that's just how much we love you guys.
Yes.
All the people that are sitting on the other side of the glass. We knew we were going to feed you, and that this would lead to a requirement that there be some facilities close by. So you're welcome.
That's not down the block and we're like, no, go over there. We're not advanced enough for this. No. But we are working on getting the bathroom back, and thank you to the patrons to help us give the money to pay for the plumber.
Yep.
We appreciate that.
All right. So, did I miss any announcements? Mark's going to yell in my ear and say, no.
It's your show, dude. I don't know what announcements.
I know. That's why I wasn't. You think I'm talking to you, but I'm actually talking to Mark.
I know.
Mark will say no.
I know.
Anyway.
The wonderful, magical man in our ears.
Bunch of stuff going on, including not only new seasons of shows, but we've got Atheist Experience, Talk Heathen, GB3's coming back, Atheist Vanguard, Preaching Humanist. We've got, I'm going to forget.
Truth Wanted.
Nonprofit. Yeah, Dan. Dan's here, by the way.
We know he's here somewhere. He's hiding. He's hiding.
But yeah, so lots of stuff. And that means that there's lots of opportunities. Some of the shows are call-in, like this one and Talk Heathen and Truth Wanted and other stuff like that. Some of the shows are not call-in.
Yep, GB3 is pre-recorded, so sorry, you guys can't yell at us live, but you can email us and yell at us there if you'd like to.
Yeah, that would be good.
We will respond and probably yell back, so.
But stay tuned for the first episode of that after the show. One of the things we're going to do is you get to pick which call we pick.
You know exactly which call I'm picking.
I just want you to tell me.
5.
Line 5.
We're going to do it.
Adam in Minnesota, thanks for waiting. You are on live with Jen and Matt.
Hello, Matt. Thanks for having me on. Just by way of introduction, one of your listeners came to one of my favorite corners of the internet, rpgcodex.com, introduced us to you and said that if I had a problem with your views, I got to give you a ring and talk about it. I guess not in person, but at least directly to you.
Okay. Do you have a problem with one of my views?
Yeah, I mean, perhaps it's more of an intellectual one rather than disliking you per se, but how is your system one of morality rather than just the amoral worship of whatever is popular or whatever demagogue happens to be successful? And as a follow-up as well, if you're going to admit that, don't you see that your system is the least possible, least practical, which is why you can claim that secular humanism has never been tried before?
Well, that's a strange double question because nothing about my view on morality is tied to what any demagogue happens to say. It is an appeal to the fact that we're physical beings in a physical universe, and the laws of the universe that dictate the consequences of our actions are going to be the thing that determine whether or not something is beneficial or harmful to us. This is a process that we continually going around discovering, and the only thing you have to do is for you and I to agree that we would like to live in a better world, and then work through the processes of trying to figure out what that better world looks like and how best to go there. So it's not about somebody said something. It's the exact opposite of that. Religions tend to be about somebody said something. You know, God proclaims this is moral or whatever. And that doesn't hold any sway for me. Sorry?
My position there is you need to take a step back for a moment because it's exactly what people said in their material conditions in the current culture. Because when you use terms like well-being, and harm and health and good and bad. I don't. As far as I can tell from your views, they're just informed by your personal desires and what you think ought to be happening.
Well, there
is no actual objective morality.
I never said there was an objective moral, so that you can make objective valuations of something by comparing the consequences of actions to a goal. But then you will always get to this point of where somebody says, but why care about that goal? Why care about well-being? But there's no objection to the secular moral system that I'm advocating that doesn't also apply to a religious one, because somebody could just say, why care what a God says, or why care what a book says? I mean, we don't even know what a God says. We just know what people say in their books that God thinks. And I don't know why I should care what a book says or what God says.
But the person who speaks of what God says or speaks of a moral system is distinct from you because you don't have a moral system. You just have your personal likes and dislikes.
No, I just specifically explained to you how it's not just about my personal dislikes or dislikes, that the physical facts of the universe are what dictate how the consequences of our actions affect us. And so,
but the goal setting itself.
Yes, the goal setting is subjective. Wouldn't you rather live in a better world?
There you go. How do you define better?
There you go. Is that like the end of the call? Was that your big?
If that's the end of the call.
Was that your big gotcha? That ultimately, whether or not you care about a better world is subjective, because it is, and so is yours.
Wait, you're jumping the line because now you're saying you keep using the word better without defining it in any meaningful way, any objective way. It's entirely subjective.
Yeah. Well, no. Whether or not something is better or worse is with comparing it to the goal. The only part that's subjective is, do you actually care about that goal? And I would argue that you probably do, right?
Well, it's not just do you care about that goal, it's what is the goal. So you said it's only better in relationship to the goal. So better is being defined by you.
I just stated what the goal is, and all I was asking was whether or not you cared about it.
But you never defined the goal. You just said the goal is better, and better is defined as what brings you closer to the goal. So do you see the circularity?
No, I didn't say the goal was better. What I've advocated for is what we've loosely called well-being. And well-being is broad and covers a great deal of territory and isn't just a simple thing.
I think that would be helpful.
I'm sorry?
Let's discuss your definition of well-being then. I think that would be very productive or the best step to take.
So I'm the first to acknowledge and have for many years, it's like you've never listened to anything I've said on morality, have for many years point out that well-being is not clearly and completely defined, and nobody's asserting that it is. This is a process whereby we are continually discovering those things which actually work in the interest of our well-being. But there are some simple examples that we can use, and it's all situational. But is it better or worse for my well-being if you chop my head off?
It could be either way.
No, it couldn't, because if you chop my head off,
well-being of who?
If you chop my head off, I'm dead, right?
Yeah, well-being is good.
And okay. See, that's not you're not asking the question. You're not addressing the question I asked. I said, for me. You got to listen. I'm actually fairly cautious.
So you admit you have a purpose then? You have a goal. Like you as a biological creature have some end or purpose.
I have.
So that's the only way I can measure what is well for you.
Continuing to live and to live a life that is worth living. That is ultimately...
But you will die. I mean, that's inevitable.
Yes, I will die. It's inevitable. So what? So will you.
So therefore, your purpose is to die in some way or some sense.
No, that's not my purpose. That's like saying that my car's purpose is to rot in a graveyard. What happens to it at the end doesn't define what its purpose is at any given time. Well,
a car, its purpose is to be a servant to the human that created it and to our ends, because it's not a life form in itself. So if my purpose in designing the car was to dump it in a rubbish yard, then I guess, yes, it's to be dumped in the yard. But your purpose,
it's yours to
talk
do.
about what is well for you. I need to know you as a biological thing. What is your end? What is your purpose?
I don't need an end purpose. The purpose is the purpose of life is living it for me.
That's just what you're saying, but then you admit that
yes,
you're going to die.
Yes, that's just what I'm saying. Please tell me what the fuck is wrong with it. I've already acknowledged.
What the fuck is wrong with it is this, Matt. I can tell you.
I don't think you can, because I can't be wrong.
I can.
I can't be wrong about what I want.
Right.
Correct. You can't be wrong in the sense of your immediate gut desire. But you can be wrong in terms of your purpose or your end or the direction you move in.
No, because you need to demonstrate that there's some other purpose for my life other than the one that I'm giving it, and why I should care, and why I should care about that purpose. Because you can tell me that you have a purpose for my life, and I don't give a shit. You can tell me that a God has a purpose for my life, and I don't give a shit.
You don't have to give a shit. It just has to be there and present.
No.
And I hope to elevate you to the point where you will see that you do have a purpose and there is some meaning to your life.
You're not going to be elevating me by asserting that there's a purpose that I don't care about.
Well, but by showing you the purpose, you will care about it because it will be a moral imperative. Because it will be.
Are you going to show me some new purpose that I haven't already considered?
Absolutely. No, if we're at the point now where you're admitting that, yes, you are actually amoral and you just have your gut desire to live.
Okay, that's just an assertion from you. Are you going to show me a purpose that I haven't considered?
Well, absolutely.
Then do it.
You have. Okay. Do you have family members that you love that you would kill yourself to save them?
That's a tough question.
I can answer that.
I don't think I would kill myself for anyone or anything, but I do have family members that I care about that I would do a great deal for.
You'd run risk at least. You'd endanger your life to save them.
Sure.
Well, there you go. You have desires or things beyond just the mere staying alive until your biological body wears down.
I didn't say... Okay, stop, Adam. First of all, I didn't say it was merely about staying alive. And second of all, I asked you if you could show me some purpose that I haven't already considered. You've failed to even begin to do that. I live my life as much for other people because of the benefits that it has on me and how I feel about it as anything.
So you don't live your life simply to stay alive?
No, and I never said I did. What I said was to live a life and a life that's worth living. And for me, that includes caring about other people as well.
And how did you define life that's worth living?
I just defined it myself.
Himself. And
it's just whatever you want.
This is what it means to be an autonomous, free person. You get to define.
Oh, no man is an island.
Are you just going to keep tossing around aphorisms that repeat what the fuck I just said?
Well, you just said a free man can live the way that he wants, but you're still a man within a universe that's greater than yourself. And
the universe isn't greater than me in any sense other than it's bigger than me.
Well, it controls much of your life, how you get your food, how you get your shelter.
The universe isn't an agent that is thinking and controlling things. What you're describing is that I still have to work, I believe, as I said at the beginning of this call, as a physical being in a physical universe where the laws of the universe dictate the consequences of my action and their effect on me. Didn't I say that? So why are you just respinning what I said as if it somehow counters what I said?
Fundamentally, I'm trying to get at your purpose of life, and all I'm getting is, and your moral system, but essentially all I'm getting is, you live for the purpose of whatever you happen to currently want, and Correct. There is no relevance to anyone else. So
it's not about what I currently want, but you seem to think that there would be something wrong with what I currently want, and you haven't identified what's wrong with what I currently want. What's wrong with wanting to live a life that I value, and that includes contributing and working with others towards a better world?
And there's nothing wrong in terms of that desire. It's how you express it.
Thank you. Bye.
I just wanted to get that one out of the way because that was directed right at you.
Yeah.
And I'm like, let's start the vibe off right, ladies and gentlemen.
Let's do one that's not directed at me, or actually one that's just not going to repeat what I said and pretend like it's rebutted me in any way.
Well, we can try.
The thing is that there is no counter.
No.
There is no solution. When religious people try to say, oh, well, that's just what you think. Dude, put on Big Lebowski. That's just like your opinion, man.
Yeah. That's what I was thinking.
I know that you've got a purpose that's bigger than you. Okay, well, that's just like your opinion. Yeah, but it comes from God. But that's a set purpose
of what the individual sets for themselves. For me, yes, I do have a bigger purpose in this life. It's my kid. That's my bigger purpose.
And by the way,
that doesn't mean that he has to make my child a bigger purpose than him.
By the way, there's one thing that I said that's going to be taken wrong and probably taken out of context, which is that what I want can't be wrong. That's actually not true. Right. The point that I was making there, it's not because you can want things that are bad for you. I can be wrong about what I want and wrong about what's in my best interest.
Right.
People vote against their best interest on a regular basis.
And that's why we
on a regular fucking basis. The thing is, what I'm saying is when I want to live a life and a better life. And if my goal, as is the goal of secular moral systems, is to get better at getting better, to learn more about how the world works so that we make better decisions about what's in our best interest, I don't see how that could be wrong. And if you tell me that a God wants something different for me, I don't care. Why is he sending you as a messenger? God could come down and tell me himself.
And then it begs the question, if he's set out to give you a better purpose for life, in whose well-being and interest is that? Is it in yours? Maybe you don't want this. It's in his.
Yeah.
So it, again, removes the autonomy from you for your life.
Yeah. There's no demonstration that even a God wanting something for people means that it's better for them.
Right. It's just what somebody else wants me to do.
But when you start talking about redemption, as he mentioned, but we didn't quite get to it, and other things like that, all you're doing is preaching what your personal opinion is and deflecting the fact that it's just your personal opinion by claiming that it's coming from a God.
It's coming from a God, or this is how I interpreted text from God.
But Matt, you've made yourself a God. I didn't make myself a God. It just happened.
Oh, wow.
It's an evolving process. Pick somebody else.
I like that it's evolving. I hate that you make me do this and put me on the spot.
You want to go to Elaine?
Yeah, let's go to Elaine. That's the next one I was going to do is Elaine.
Hey, Elaine in Illinois. Thanks for waiting. You're on with Jen and Matt.
Hi, Elaine.
Hi, Jen and Matt.
How you doing?
Can I first say this? Do you all know about who I am?
Yes, you emailed. You were shot 9 times and survived.
Okay, so first we're going to get this out the way. Jen, no offense to you, Jen, but this is directly me and Matt that's having this conversation.
Oh, I've been
actually, no, we're not. Goodbye.
Oh.
You don't dictate who gets to talk on this show. That's my job. So for those who want, Jen is a good friend of mine who's here for promoting GB3 and come on the show. But the caller, Elaine, has been on like Maury or something. She was shot 9 times and wanted to call in to basically tell her story, I'm pretty sure, so she can hawk more books about how she's a miracle. And she should go learn some more about statistics and maybe read up on people like Malala Yousafzai, who was shot in the head.
The friend that I had that was literally shot in the street 9 times and lived.
The fact that somebody was shot and lived is, if anything, a testament to A, the way the human body works and the damage that bullets can and can't do depending on how and where you're shot, and the marvelous advances in medical technology, to where in 2015, for example, there were some 80,000 people or so who were shot in the United States, and then like 30,000 or so of them died. So now we're talking about 2/3 didn't die. Then it's about where they got hit and how often. And even if, I mean, there was one of the kids from Columbine got shot and bullet fragments ripped through his brain while he remained lucid, and he's still around today.
I have military friends of mine who have been deployed 4, 5, 6, 7 times. They have shrapnel in their brains. They have bullets they're walking around with that were completely lucid after being blown up.
Yeah, Elaine wanted us to know that she still has bullets in her body, and so do some friends of mine, so do some friends of hers. None of this, while you may be a rarity within humanity, that you were shot 9 times, you still carry around a couple bullets, and you're alive, none of that points to a miracle, a God, or anything else, nor could it, because the fact that you survive is independent from how and why you survived. And you don't get to say that it's because of a God unless you can actually demonstrate that. And if you could demonstrate that, you would probably get a Nobel Prize.
Right.
But you didn't, Elaine. Malala did. And she's a Muslim who is trying to defend the rights of Muslim women to get education. So if anybody has a stronger claim than you, it would be her. Reconstructive surgery, all that stuff. So,
and I believe she still held her faith after.
Yeah.
So if anybody's going to make the argument of my God loves me more, it's going to be her.
So what really needs to happen is you need to get a hold of her.
Yeah.
And you two have a conversation about whose God saved whom. And then whichever one of you ultimately wins out, you can call back then and tell me that you're only talking to me. Because then I'll hang up again.
I was looking forward to that one.
I was too. But so for interest, she sent in this email, which was actually twice, which was in all caps, to basically let me know that she didn't think she was going to be treated fairly because she was an African-American woman. And we were all ready. I actually, that's how I have that statistic on hand. I actually went and looked up some information about the number of shooting incidents. I was so excited.
I'm like, I actually know this. I can talk about this. Like, I know what I'm doing.
Yeah, I was looking forward to it. But don't you dare call in and say who is or isn't going to talk on this show. No. That ain't happening.
Aww.
Who's next?
I love you too. Nick. Let's have a nicer tone right now.
Hey, Nick, how are you? You're on with Jen and Matt.
Hey, I'm doing great. How are you guys doing?
We're doing well. Thank you for calling, Nick.
Awesome.
Yeah, of course. Actually, I think my question is going to dovetail really well off of 2 callers ago, because it definitely deals in the areas of morality and purpose, but from a completely different perspective. My question for you, for either of you, is, you see, I'm a recently out atheist.
Okay.
And my family is still very fundamentalist Christian, both my wife's family and my family. I've yet to tell them.
Okay.
And I'm really struggling with that one because I love them a lot.
Where's your wife in this?
Yeah.
Her and I align pretty closely. I would say I'm a little bit further on the atheist spectrum than she is, but she's a pastor's kid. My father-in-law is still a minister, and both of our families are still heavily involved in the church.
What kind of minister?
Yeah, what? Just so we get a scope of what we're doing.
He's basically non-denominational, maybe evangelical Christian type.
Just your basic run-of-the-mill evangelical Christian.
Well, So there's tons. I mean, there's no way to predict this, and you're going to know both your family and your in-laws far better than we will.
Right.
What do you suspect is likely to happen, And what were you thinking as far as how you were going to come out?
Yeah, that's a good. Do you have a plan in place yet on how you're wanting to kind of come out to this? Another question: how close are you to your families? Is another good question.
Yeah, those are both wonderful questions. So here's the issue that I'm running up against. So my father-in-law and I are like best friends. We're buddies. We do everything together. We love working in the shop together. We love hanging out and, smoking cigars and drinking whiskey together. I mean, it's just like we're total buddies. And
this is your father-in-law, the minister.
Yeah, the minister.
Yes. Yeah.
You're probably going to be fine.
Don't tell anyone. Don't tell anyone. Don't tell. But I'm afraid it's going to damage our relationship. That's the problem that I'm having.
Damage the relationship to what extent? Is it, I'm disappointed and I understand, but these are your beliefs, or we're no longer speaking to you? I don't know if you have children, but I'm going to say like you and your children.
I do not have children, no, but I am afraid that it's going to damage our friendship because he's still so fundamentalist Christian, and of course, I think that's a load of horseshit.
Okay, that's not the way I'd phrase it for the first conversation.
That would not be good.
But I'm with you.
That would not be good.
Absolutely not. I'm sorry.
And I make that point because I make that point because I know you know that, and this is the right thing. So, you've got a relationship with your father-in-law that is currently good. What was your plan?
Yes.
Because if it was, hey, I want to.
My plan is. So here's my plan. My plan is to call somebody who has a lot more experience in this and get some wisdom and advice on how to go about this situation.
Wow, who's that?
Yeah, it's not me. I came out like a bull in a china shop to my family.
I've addressed this a bunch of times. The big thing is don't make a big thing of it.
Yeah.
Don't do the, hey, can we sit down and talk? I've got something important to say. The better course of action is to just keep being you, the person that he knows and cares about, and gradually be more honest when those types of conversations come up. Because I think you may find if you're hanging out with him this much and you guys have interactions and conversations, unless you are like a really good liar and have been actively doing it, there's probably suspicions there, especially from somebody in a ministerial capacity, about where you are on the God, path. And if you're just gradually more honest, and you don't have to toss out the A word, and you don't have to, go down the path that it's horseshit, and say, hey, I don't think I believe this. I don't think I believe this anymore. I've got my doubts and other stuff. And you can even, and probably sincerely, say, I'm not sure how comfortable I am talking about it because I worry that it's going to impact our relationship. And for now, I'd just like, some patience, and maybe you can pray for me. And then as I have questions and stuff, we can have conversations like that. All of which would be honest, I would expect. And letting them know that you still care about them and you still care about that relationship.
Right.
And be compassionate there's going to be some pushback. Well, how come you don't believe this? And, everything, your parents taught you and we taught, expect some pushback, but come at that with compassion.
Yeah, right off the bat, it's going to be, for anybody in a minister capacity, especially somebody who's been hanging out with you and drinking whiskey and smoking cigars and stuff, it's going to be, I care about him. I'm concerned about him. I'll pray. He's going to be familiar, if he's any kind of minister at all, with people who are having crisis of faith and doubts, because this happens to everybody. And if he's doing his job as a minister, he's run across a whole bunch of people like that. You can, you can very clearly do the, I don't think I believe that stuff anymore, or I'm pretty sure, or I don't believe that stuff anymore. I don't necessarily know what label I might be comfortable with or how to talk about it. But doing the, hey, let's sit down and have a talk is probably the wrong way to go about it.
If the family was more distant, then sure, I would say, let's do it that way.
That?
If the family was more distant, I'd be like, yeah, you can kind of come out like I did. And I was like, by the way, but because you guys are so close, the best thing, and if he's coming at you with questions that are like, well, why this and why that and why this, and more out of like a disappointment, you can, and if you're not comfortable with it, you can just say, that's still something I'm looking into. and I do want to have this conversation with you, but I want to make sure that we can have the right conversation about this.
And part of me, so here's kind of the second half of that. By the way, thank you. That's all. Thank you. I really appreciate kind of words of wisdom on that. So the second half of that, is it worth it? And I mean, I'm speaking more to my side of the family, my parents. I know it would cause them great suffering to know where I stand. I mean, as their little angel boy who served in every single ministry you can possibly imagine, and went on a overseas missions trip to Uganda and Rwanda when I was 11 years old without my family. I mean, that's how they see me still.
There may be some freakouts.
That's not who I am.
There may or may not be some freakouts, but one thing is that they know you, they care about you, and you've definitely got the cred. It's not like you've been some problem. I mean, you did mission trips and stuff. Yeah. It's going to be very difficult for them to reconcile all that. And you've got to decide whether it's more important for you to be honest about who you are and have people, accept you and appreciate you for who you are, or if you're going to pretend. And I've told people before that if you think that, coming out is going to jeopardize your health, your life,
your financial
relationships,
standing,
and all that stuff to a degree that's not comfortable, then don't do it. Yeah. But
that's a question you have to ask yourself is am I okay with them not knowing? Am I okay with kind of putting the mask on and bowing my head and pretending to pray at meals and nodding my head when they're talking about, hey, you believe in this too, right? If you're okay, if the fear of your parents being disappointed outweighs more than you being okay with it, no, why, don't make the waves if you guys have a really good relationship. However, if it's eating up at you and you're like, no, I need to be honest with my parents, kid gloves is my favorite expression when it comes down to very sensitive topics. Softer kid gloves. And don't, like we said, kick the door in and be like, get all the crucifixes off the wall. We don't believe in that anymore. No, don't do that, please.
That's right. So I'm going to steal a story. Right. I'm going to steal a story from my good friend Seth.
Yeah.
I won't tell you the whole story. If you go watch the event that Seth and I did in Phoenix a couple months ago, Seth tells the story there. But the thing to think about this in reverse, and this can come up in conversation when you're talking about this with them. Let's imagine that everybody on both sides of the family were a bunch of godless heathens. And one of them discovered Jesus. Don't you think they'd be not the slightest bit shy about telling you this wonderful thing that they found? That they would feel an obligation to? Now, in that case, they have a desire to because they want to share this because they have an obligation to, work for the Holy Spirit and help potentially save your soul. You have a much more noble obligation than that, which is you have an obligation to the truth, to respect yourself, to make sure that the people in your life know who you are, that you don't have to be fake, that you don't have to pretend, and there's no reason why you should sit silently by when what you've discovered is not, oh, there is no God, or oh, this is horseshit, or whatever else, but you've discovered that you didn't have good reasons for your beliefs, and that there may in fact be a better way to live a life than what a particular religion prescribes, and that you are only following your conscience to be a good person, to be an intellectually honest person, and to respect and show that you love and care about them by being open and honest with them. And if that puts them in the position where if the relationship ends, it's on their shoulders.
Yes.
It's because of them, and they value their religion more than you, whereas you don't value or hate their religion as much as you value your relationship with them.
Right, exactly.
And I understand that that's a hard thing to face. It's, wow, they kind of care about me more than this. And I understand that's a hard thing to face, which is why this, is it worth it? This is also a thing you have to weigh out.
So what are you thinking?
Right.
Sorry, I cut off.
So I always go back and forth because there's part of me that completely 100% aligns with what you just said and just being open and honest about everything. But then there's the part that makes me go, yeah, but they're what we call the benign form of Christianity, where they're not out there picketing in the streets. They're not holding up, signs in the streets, and they're not blowing up facilities and stuff. It's a very benign form.
Why does it matter?
Would that make a difference, though?
Because are you trying to change them?
Because it's not hurting anyone.
Okay.
If it was affecting other people, then that's when I definitely feel a moral obligation to step in and say, no, this is hurting.
That's a difference. That's a moral obligation. That's a moral obligation to try to change their mind and make them better people. You're not doing that. You're saying you're good people. I don't agree with your religion. I don't think your particular religion is as harmful as others. So I'm not trying to change your mind. I just want you to know who I am.
And then if especially I've seen this happen. Well, can you just pretend? Like when you're around us, and then they actively are hurting somebody.
Okay, then when you come over to my house, you pretend that, your religion's crap. When I'm at your house, I'll pretend that your religion's real.
But then it's actively hurting somebody to ask somebody to lie.
No, I mean, I'm being sarcastic.
No,
if somebody asks you to pretend, you can point out that if your entire goal is to be honest with who you are, them asking you to pretend is absolutely insulting, and it's the rough equivalent of you asking them to pretend that they don't believe when they're around you.
Right.
That's silly. And they won't do it, and maybe it'll wake them up to what they're doing.
Right, it was the case of, they're not hurting anybody, but yet if they, turn their back on loving somebody, they are hurting somebody over this.
True. I mean, but we don't know what they're going to do yet.
Right.
It's a bit of a moral dilemma.
We're speculating at this point.
What's the dilemma, Nick? Because I'm not seeing a dilemma.
Yeah.
No, I understand it's difficult, but I don't see a moral dilemma here.
Honestly, the biggest moral dilemma that I have is with my stepmother and the amount of suffering that I know it'll cause her. That's the biggest.
You're not the one. You are not the one causing the suffering. Right. Her religion is.
You're still the same person that you've always been. You're still the same son or stepson, I'm not sure what your relationship is, that she's always loved. Yeah. So why would you not changing anything about yourself as a person be causing her suffering? No, it's her view of her religion that's going to be causing this, because you haven't changed.
Well, he has changed.
Well,
but
his ideas have changed, but him as a person hasn't changed.
Maybe he is. Maybe he's changed as a person, but it's the concern here is that if somebody says, "Oh, what the way you've decided, the way you're living your life hurts me," well, the way you're living your life hurts me too, because if your religion, which I suspected was largely benign, is enough to cause you pain because I don't agree with you, and to potentially end or damage a relationship because I don't agree with you, now I'm more concerned about your religion than I was before.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
The only real question here, and this is something, by the way, that I mean, you're at the end of the day, you're going to have to be you, but you're going to want to sit down with your wife, and talk about all the potential impact that this is going to have on each of you individually and both of you together, and you guys are where the compromise starts. That conversation.
Right. And we have had that conversation. It's like, do we tell our parents? Do we tell them where we're at? At this point, my wife doesn't want to, essentially for the same reasons that I stand, is that she doesn't want to compromise our relationships, in any way.
Now we're to a moral dilemma,
right?
Because if you decide to come out to everybody, you're probably going to inadvertently be outing her, and that's not something you get to do.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I don't want to do that, of course. Yeah, I don't want to compromise that.
Or put her on the spot. Well, do you believe this too?
Yeah, and that's what I meant by inadvertently.
Yeah. I thought they were just like, she's probably.
What's wrong with your husband? Well, so for now, you guys are going to have to decide what to do about this together, and with the full knowledge of what the consequences might be. And then each of you is going to have to make up your mind about whether or not you're comfortable with that. There are some people who can be, and there are some people who can't.
Put it on paper. That's always my favorite thing to do, is actually write out a pros and cons list and look at it back at you and say, okay, is this worth it?
Yeah, no, I've definitely done. I've got that document on my computer, trust me.
I don't have anything else for you, Nick, other than as you go through this and figure it out. First of all, you can always jump in the Discord server and talk to some other people who might have gone through similar things. And then as you and your wife make decisions and move forward, you can call and let us know how it goes. But you can also participate. And we constantly are recommending recoveringfromreligion.org, which is a great resource to find other people who are in similar situations. And once you find your way through this, no matter what the resolution turns out to be, you're not alone now, and you won't be alone then. Greta Christina wrote a book on coming out, how to do it, and why. And over the course of the research for the book, I think she interviewed like 300 or 400 people, something like that,
yeah.
who had come out. And while many of them went through incredible difficulties, only one person out of that entire poll actually said that they actually regret coming out. That even though there were struggles and everything else, like for me, I started doing a TV show. And actually, I wasn't out to my family when I started doing the show. Eventually,
that's out of the bag.
Yeah, eventually I was outed. There were a lot of struggles, and including like if you go watch the episode from April where I read the birthday card that they sent me, there's been a lot of issues. But my parents are still my parents. I still love them. We still get along. There are many people who went through far worse than I ever would. My ex-wife, went through far worse than I was ever going to go through, and continues to go through some of that. So yeah, I hope for the best, and I think if you guys talk it out.
Describing the relationship you guys have, I don't think it's going to be this of a thing, because they probably already know. I'm in agreement with Jen, but it's hard to say. Because we don't know them.
It's your life and it's your wife's life, and so that's where take it all in, make a decision, and if you find you can't make a decision, keep on trucking.
Yeah. If you still can't make a decision, don't make the decision because you can't make the decision. Just say, we're putting this off for now.
Right. Awesome. Well, hey, you know what? I really appreciate that. This is something that's been on my mind, and it's been weighing heavily on me for the last, honestly, year or two. It's been something that I've been debating, and I haven't had a whole lot of people to discuss this topic with, and talk to people who have been. Sounds like Matt. Jen. I don't know about you, but Matt, your past and my past are fairly similar in where we came from. So that's kind of why I wanted to call in and see, what your process was in that, and any advice that you have. So I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for taking my call.
Sure.
And check out our Discord. We have a great community there that may be able to, help you.
Yeah, I will do that.
Thank you.
Cool, thanks. Yeah, I never sat around and drank whiskey with my father-in-law, but he wasn't a minister, so.
See, but you had the more religious upbringing to where I didn't, but your family was like, okay, and my family nuked everything to the ground over me.
Oh, my family was not okay, but it wasn't quite nukage.
Oh, yeah. Mine was full-blown Facebook, cursing out nukage. So that was fun.
Speaking of folks from Tennessee.
Oh, no, my family's not from Tennessee.
No, I was talking about my father-in-law and my ex-wife.
That's right.
Yes.
That's right.
Not everything's about you, Jen.
Says who?
Oh,
Says
shit.
who?
John in Tennessee, thanks for waiting. You're on with us.
Hey, Matt. Appreciate you letting me come on the show. How you guys doing?
Sure.
Oh, great. Thank you for calling.
So I was came across your show a couple weeks ago and watched some of your debates, Matt, with Jordan Peterson and some of the other folks. Found it interesting and watched a bunch of your show. And what the observation I've had is that a huge portion of your arguments against God's existence, not from a pure theistic or atheist perspective, but it seems to be founded in your observations of potential fallacies in man-made religion.
Okay, so
this conversation,
we have to fix that, because I really don't have that much in the way of arguments against God's existence, and I'm not even claiming that a God doesn't exist. Pointing out the problems in the arguments for God's existence is enough to hold the default position, which is I'm not convinced that there's a God, and until such time as those arguments actually show themselves to be reasonable, I shouldn't be convinced.
Right.
And that's what I had concluded. I was referring specifically in context of most of your arguments I hear you make to other people are in regard to scripture fallacies and stuff like that.
Oh, no, that's not even close to
the last piece of.
That's not even close to most of it. Most of the arguments, most of the classical arguments for God's existence apply to any of the gods that would fit within classical theism, any of the Abrahamic gods and any others. But when I point out fallacies in reasoning, it's actually more addressing the notion of the supernatural and things like that.
Right. So the purpose of my call is to have a conversation, and I'm not going to reference anything from the Holy Books, spirituality, altered states of consciousness.
Okay.
My purpose is to make arguments from a from known observable science, genetics, quantum mechanics, linguistics, and then use logic to create directly comparable analogies and to argue that it's more logical and plausible that a creator, not from a specific theistic perspective, but a creator in general, is more likely than, and the evidence would support the existence of that entity existing, not that we exist through accident, random chance, laws of natural selection, things of that nature.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, but it sounds like a butt ton. I mean,
well, I think it is. I've spent quite a few years researching this stuff.
Well, the other thing to remember is that we have 6 lines, so there's 500 people waiting.
Can we piece some of this out?
Why don't you just start with your best argument for the existence of a God?
Okay, before I do that, I want to make sure we're the same starting point. So, is it your position that God must be proven beyond all doubt to exist? As I've heard you say, you need to see him face to face, for example. Or do you agree that a plausible argument based on physical evidence, observable and acceptable by science, will be enough to reach the conclusion that a higher power exists?
Well, you can't do that with science, just like you can't do it with mathematics. There's no variable for God. So I don't hold that you can be absolutely certain of anything, so I'd never hold that something would need to be proven beyond all doubt. Different claims required...
Okay, so plausible, so plausible arguments, okay. Right?
Not all claims are created equally, and so different quantities and qualities of evidence would need to be presented for various claims.
All right, so from a logical and observable perspective, would you agree that without intelligence of some level, language can form? Like things like syntax, context, and determination will be used as the method of information transfer.
Well, you said without intelligence, language can form, and I think you meant can't.
Can't.
Are you saying without it, it can form?
Oh, am I saying that language can form in the absence of intelligence? No.
Yeah. Okay. Would you agree that...
No, hang on. I just acknowledged that I'm not saying that language can form in the absence of intelligence. That doesn't mean that I'm asserting anything.
Okay. Would you agree that binary code is a language and that without it, or another language used to the same purpose, the technology we're using right now to communicate could not exist? Or at least not without a different method of communication being designed, but not without a direct cause that requires intelligence?
So nothing about the nature of a binary bit itself is code. No. Code is what we use when we describe using ones and zeros or some other mathematical construct to encode language.
The syntax of binary was designed by a human, right?
Yeah, the syntax of the binary language that we use in computers was, but it didn't have to be that way.
No.
Okay. Would you agree that DNA is a quaternary programming language that has syntax, context, and a plethora of logic rules for its baseline?
No.
Well, scientists would agree otherwise.
No, science. No. So here's the thing. You can. Here's the John. Yes, you're going to find scientists who are going to agree with anything, but the scientists that talk about DNA as a language are using it as an analog. What we're talking about are chemicals that are self-replicating that create these structures. And so it can be viewed as a language, just like many other things can be viewed as a language in a form of analogy, but not as a language that was intentionally constructed to convey information, to pass a thought from an intelligence to another intelligence.
Okay, so it's from that context, are you arguing that any form of technology could form without a prior blueprint that has been created from a language that was utilized by an intelligence to form it? And where I'm going with that is I would strongly disagree with your argument on scientists not saying it's a language.
Nobody had to have a blueprint.
Right.
Nobody had to have a blueprint for a lever or a wheel. So yes, technology doesn't necessarily require an actual blueprint and intelligence. Some bits of technology begin just as discoveries of the physical facts, and then we build from them.
Right. Okay. So that's interesting. You said we build from them, and we're using existing components from an intelligent perspective to achieve an objective, right?
Yes.
Yes.
So I'm wondering if your knowledge of nanotechnology that exists inside of our every life form is lacking, because there's not too much in our cells that are the equivalent of a lever. It's highly functional technologies that some of which operate on a quantum level and blow the mind of high-level synthetic chemists right now that are trying to accomplish anything in the remote same realm. We're not talking about levers. We're talking about AI robots that are building and deconstructing things. And just to transcribe
cool story
DNA. It's not a story, it's a fact.
Oh, no. But it's a really cool story because you've become so enamored at the cell level that you haven't even addressed how it got to that level.
That cell level. Thank you.
Because what I'm talking about is...
I have, actually. And you're denying...
Listen, John, I mean, you didn't address it in this call. I'm not assessing your entire study for your entire life. When I talked about how the simplest forms of technology don't require any necessary intelligence, they're a recognition of physical things in the universe. Similarly, while we don't have a full understanding of how abiogenesis occurred or the full process that led to a modern cell, there is nothing that necessarily requires that something magical or intelligent agent necessarily needs to step in when what we're talking about are chemicals interacting under the laws of physics. The fact is the fact is you are looking at something and saying, wow, this is really complex. I don't see how that could have happened without an intelligent, and that is by definition an argument from personal incredulity. The fact that you may not know how it happens doesn't mean that you can then conclude that it's more plausible or more likely that it came from an intelligence, because you would need to demonstrate that such an intelligence exists and is possible and plausible to exist.
Okay, so the reason I started this off with syntax and language and all those different variables not
is because you expected me to agree that DNA is a code, and I don't.
Yeah. No. Actually, I didn't expect you to agree to it, but
you sure sounded like you did.
Well, because if you go and you do some basic research, every geneticist on this planet will disagree with you on the fact that there are very...
You're on hold.
Oh, we're doing timeouts today? Yay for a timeout.
I would agree with you that if you did some basic research, you would find that geneticists would refer to DNA as a code. And if you do something beyond basic research, you'll find out what I actually told you, which is that this is an analogy, and none of them, or no significant portion of them, are claiming that, wow, this genetic code must have come from an intelligence. And when they say that it's a code, that they mean it is a transmission of information from an intelligence to an intelligence. You have to do more than the basic research, John. That's my point.
So am I back on now?
I don't know. Did you listen?
I did listen.
What did I say?
You said that geneticists would say that it's chemical reactions and doesn't infer intelligence to intelligence.
Okay.
However, the data transfer, that's the whole point of talking about information, is that the foundational premise is whether or not data can come from without the intelligence being there existing prior to. Which is the whole point of why I said, can technology of high levels in the format in which we're talking about, nanotechnology, robots, the microphone we're using, the internet, et cetera, would any of that be possible without intelligence? To which you agreed, as I recall.
No, I didn't. No. You're recalling incorrectly because you didn't listen and you don't know the difference between affirming the consequent and rejecting a negative.
High-level technology is totally different than what you're talking about.
No, I didn't. Goodbye, John.
Bye-bye.
You want to say goodbye?
Yes.
Okay. If you go back on the call, what you asked, and this is why I paused to make sure that John understood it, was that I'm not asserting what is or is not required for any level of technology. So when I said I'm not asserting that that technology must or must come from an intelligence. I'm also not asserting that it cannot come from an intelligence. And so when you look at something like a microphone, the reason that we know that it was designed is because we have mountains of evidence for that and no evidence of microphones coming about by natural causes. John's problem is that he seems to think that we recognize design by complexity.
By complexity, yes.
You don't.
No.
You recognize design by contrasting it with that which naturally occurs. You only get to claim that something is designed when you can show that it is designed. And you do that by beginning by contrasting with nature and then finding out the how and why behind it when it was designed. But when you talk about cells, all of the evidence points to cells being something that evolved naturally without a guiding hand. This is
just because it's complex does not mean intelligent design had to be put behind it.
And the thing that John wants to call data, because there's this information theory about DNA. Oh, well, it's a quaternary code and it's conveying information. No. There's no mind involved, and I would argue that there is no true data involved, and that all of these are just analogies. And you might as well have taken a glass of water, put some Kool-Aid mix in it, stirred it all up, strained it out repeatedly, taken a sip and said, wow, still tastes a little like Kool-Aid. Yeah. And the Kool-Aid taste is the data that you're claiming survived that process. It's still just chemicals. And so far as we can tell, a microphone isn't going to form itself, has no way of forming itself. Oh, wait a minute. What about life? Nobody's cracked that question. So the best you can do is say, hey, there are mysteries to life that we don't have a current scientific explanation for or don't have a full explanation for, and I will agree.
And be okay with that. We don't need to know the answer for everything. We don't. We don't need to, this is why it happened. No, we're still figuring it out. It's okay.
And when you're going to start talking about probabilities and plausibility, how do you determine that a God is more plausible or more probable than nature when we have evidence for nature and no evidence for gods? We don't have a God we can examine. We don't have any...
We don't have a God that we can test DNA samples against.
We don't have a single example of a God ever doing anything. And yet you're assuming that there is a God, it can do stuff, it has done stuff, and yet somehow it's hiding from us.
And it can create everything. But he just doesn't want to talk right now. He's having his time away right now.
And on that note, we're going to get to something roughly similar. We've got Alonzo in Virginia.
Oh,
You're on with
That's
Jen and Matt.
Hey, Matt. Hey, Jen.
Hi.
Great to see you. This is my first time actually watching you guys live, so that's great. So what I've been doing recently is I've been watching a lot of YouTube videos that have Matt in them. And
I'm sorry.
And I was like, yeah, well, one of the things that you said in one of those videos was that you weren't completely sure that if, say Jesus or Thor or whatnot came down from the sky, that you could believe that they were God. Is that still kind of your view?
How would you tell? Like if somebody came down and revealed themselves and said, I am Jesus and I am divine, how would you prove either of those?
That it's him, that it's not some guy that just walked off his fire escape 8 stories up and it's a cloudy day. How do we not know?
Right. So one of the things...
That's a legit question.
Yeah, no, it's an actual question.
Can you answer it?
Yeah, so basically, here's kind of my perspective and what I was thinking. There's kind of 2 kinds of God. You have this, the tri-omni God, and then you have pretty much every other God that's ever existed, like, Thor and...
Okay, there's 2 kinds of people. There's... you can do this all day long.
Yeah.
There's many different types of God categories. I'm just saying, you were asking me because people had asked, hey, if Jesus came down and revealed himself to you. Now, if it were in fact Jesus and he in fact was divine and he had some way of revealing and demonstrating this to me, of course I would believe.
Right.
My question is, the example that people give presumes quite a bit. Mm-hmm. Presumes that this is something that could happen or could be self-evident. I'm just saying, if somebody comes down and says, hey, I'm Jesus and I'm divine, how could you prove either of those things?
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, the easy way is, let's not say use Jesus. Let's use, say, Thor as an example. Let's say Thor comes down. He's got this hammer. He spins it and he throws it, and it comes back. Somebody eats his goats, and he says, okay, let's take those goat bones and remake the goats and whatnot.
Okay, so now you've got someone who's claiming to be Thor, and I'm assuming Thor in a God sense.
Right.
And he can do a magic trick with a hammer, and he can revive dead goats that have been ripped to pieces, right?
That have been picked to bones, I think.
Now, how did he do either one of those things?
I don't think it matters, how he did it. We can just observe that he does.
But then what do we have to test against if this guy's lying and pulling a magic trick over an actual miracle, quote unquote? If we can't say how he did it, how do we know it's not the Loch Ness Monster? How do we know it's not Bigfoot in pictures? Why would that make us believe that it was real?
The time to believe something is after there's evidence for it. Right. Now, if somebody showed up, claimed they were Thor, threw their hammer, it came back to them, what I would believe is that they're able to throw their hammer and have it come back to them. If they were able to take dismembered goats and put them back together and bring them back to life, what I would believe is that they're able to take dismembered goats and bring them back to life. Those would both be incredibly impressive. But if I don't have the ability, this is why Arthur C. Clarke pointed out that any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. There's a knowledge threshold. There's something where beyond that, I just don't understand. It does not enter my ken. I can't understand it. And so to proclaim that this person is in fact a god or is in fact doing something supernatural would be to claim that I have an understanding of the supernatural sufficient to reach that conclusion. And I don't. And I don't see that anybody else does, and nobody's come up with a mechanism to show this. So it reminds me when I debated Lacona, and he was like, well, if somebody came in and chopped my head off, and you went out in the lobby, and I walked out with my head back on, wouldn't you call that a miracle? And I'd say, well, there's a lot of questions there, but what I would believe is that you had your head chopped off, and now your head's back on. But the how and why behind it and what the explanation is, I don't know.
Right. So basically, one of the things I wanted to get to was the fact that most gods are basically sufficiently powerful beings from, Clarke's definition, as it were, and that if a sufficiently powerful being comes down and does sufficiently powerful things, we should believe that, these sufficiently powerful beings, exist, if that makes sense.
I would be fine to accept that a sufficiently powerful being exists to do what was demonstrated, but this is how you make cargo cults. I'm talking about whether or not something is actually supernatural. There are magic tricks that I can do that would make me a god to incredibly primitive people, but that doesn't mean I am. Just because something's happening that's beyond their understanding doesn't mean that it rises to the level of the supernatural. People have been faking the supernatural for as long as we've been around, as far as I can tell.
For as long as there's been religion.
I'm just not arrogant enough to say, I have in fact discovered and confirmed the supernatural just because I don't know how something was done.
Mm-hmm. Right. And that would be basically a supernaturalism of the I don't know how it's done, therefore it must be supernatural.
Right. That's a fallacy.
That's a fallacy, right. And that does not push either one of us to believe. We want to see how it was done. We want to know why it was done.
If somebody can demonstrate that the supernatural exists and how we can test for that, then I'm fine with the supernatural. Mm-hmm. But nobody's done that. What's happened is we've had a monumentally lengthy history of human beings who think they've done that or claim they've done that. And every time we've been able to test to actually verify if they're correct, they've not been correct. In all of history, every time we've found the actual cause for something, it has never been supernatural. There are still questions we don't have an explanation for, and it would be just as much of a mistake for us to presume that the explanation is supernatural for those things as it was for lightning being caused by Zeus.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Hey, thanks for your response there. There's a couple of other things I wanted to ask you about, and this one kind of actually ties in, is how do you feel about what are called supernatural hallucinations, say from mushrooms or whatnot? They're one of the things that...
Why would you call them supernatural?
Why would they be a supernatural phenomenon?
I've taken hallucinogenics. We've studied hallucinogenics. Yes. You have a brain that is altered, that is seeing things that aren't there. What on earth would
What makes
possess
that
you to think
supernatural?
that they're seeing something that's real and that the explanation is then also supernatural?
Think about it like this, okay? You have visual hallucinations, say, okay? And what that would indicate is that, yes, these specific visual hallucinations I'm having are not real. Okay. And so having what we might describe as spiritual hallucinations indicates that we might have some sort of spiritual sense, which perhaps implies the spiritual reality.
No, even if we have, so what we have is flawed understandings of things. And so we're not sensing the supernatural. We're experiencing something and calling it supernatural.
Right.
When I see something, when I'm on drugs, I call it a hallucination only to the extent that I'm aware that what I'm experiencing has no corollary in reality as far as I can tell. If it turns out that something that I saw on an acid trip is actually gazing into a world beyond our own, I still don't know that it's supernatural. And until somebody comes up with a way to actually investigate that, it's just a cool trip.
Right. And as far as spiritual awakenings, and we've heard these spiritual retreats with peyote, with acid and everything
DMT,
else.
ayahuasca.
DMT, right. You have to remember that you're coming into this trip, which severely alters your brain, with these kind of preconceptions and this is already what I believe. And I don't give a shit what anyone says. If you're going to take something like that, you're hyping yourself up before. I'm going to see some cool shit. I'm going to feel some cool shit. So you're already setting the stage for you to feel some out-of-body experience that you're going to equate to spirituality, if that's what you believe in. There's nothing supernatural about this. It's your brain's own programming about what you believe.
As far as we can tell. And so, have you seen Empire Strikes Back?
Yes, I have. I love Star Wars.
Sweet. Jen just watched all of them this week.
Yes, this is fresh for me.
You remember when Yoda's training Luke, and he's getting ready to head in there, and he says, "What's in there?" And he says, "Only what you take with you." That's what goes into a trip as far as we can tell. All of the baggage of your brain, whatever expectations you have, and then an altered chemical state. I'm not saying there's nothing more than that. I'm saying if there's more than that, somebody would need to demonstrate it. The same as Thor reviving goats.
Okay, awesome. Hey, it was really great to get your thoughts on that. There's only one thing I'd kind of like to also get your thoughts about before I'm done is one of the things is that skepticism seems to be basically, hey, we're going to ask questions about these things. And can you call yourself a Christian, honestly going through and, being skeptical about everything and then reaching the conclusion that God does indeed exist?
That's a great question.
That's a great question.
And the answer is, yes, you can call yourself whatever the hell you want. But if, as other people have pointed out, if you think that you've used skepticism and reached the conclusion that there is in fact a God,
have you used skepticism correctly?
I think you've used skepticism incorrectly, because if you could do that, if a God claim could withstand the rigors of inquiry such that a critical examination would actually confirm a God's existence, you would have essentially proved God and fundamentally changed the world.
Right.
Skepticism isn't about a list of positions.
No.
It's about a method of understanding reality and trying to have the best understanding you can. It doesn't mean that you're going to be a perfect thinker. It doesn't mean you're not going to make mistakes. So you can be a skeptic and be a Christian, but you're probably doing one of them or both of them poorly.
You could be skeptical about your Christianity.
Or you could call yourself a Christian and just have we've had some people call with some really unique versions of Christianity. In much the same way that there's like the Jews for Jesus, there are these skeptical, the non-theistic Jesus acolytes. And so they would call themselves Christian. Mm-hmm. Like take Thomas Jefferson, for example. If you go look at the Jefferson Bible, he chopped out everything that had anything to do with miracles or whatever and just took the words from Jesus that he considered to be wisdom. And so you could call yourself a Christian in that context and believe nothing supernatural.
Mm-hmm.
You could be skeptical about religion and be religious. You can question it. But to call yourself a skeptic Christian?
It's unusual. You could call yourself that.
Sure.
I'd want to know more. Because I'm a skeptic.
Okay.
Because then we'd have to get into, well, why are you being a skeptic about your Christianity?
What do you mean when you say you're a Christian? What do you mean when you say you're a skeptic?
Why are you questioning it to begin with in the first place? And then we can get the ball rolling on, well, are you really a Christian? Are you solid in your faith?
Yeah, but the problem is that I don't get to define what is or isn't a true Christian.
Right.
And that's why people can call me and say, I'm a Christian and I don't believe in anything supernatural and I don't believe in this and I don't believe in that. But there was this alien guy who came down from another planet and he was Yeshua and that's why he didn't have a father and he, you know, all this other stuff. You can come up with whatever you want and call it Christian.
Right. Okay. Well, one of the things is that I feel like I'm constantly, you know, questioning my faith, you know, trying to see if it holds up against reality. And for me, at the least, I feel like it has, you know. And
well, what kind of test have you done
that
passed? Because that would be interesting.
So, so I've got to, I guess, back up a little bit in terms of my experience. Is that like I feel like I've had experiences of God in my life where God has, you know, come to me and directly talked to me. And it's not always what I wanted to hear at the time, you know? And so...
I'm gonna interrupt because I kind of have to.
Yeah.
Because also we're running short on time. Yeah. But I need clarification on some things.
Yeah.
You say God's talked to you. Is it an audible voice or a feeling or what?
A vision or, yeah.
So for me, it's just like somebody talking to me, you know.
Like you hear it through your ears or in your head?
In your head.
In my head.
Okay, so it's not like somebody talking to you. So you said it was like somebody talking to you. When people talk to me, I don't just hear it in my head. I hear it through my ears, clearly.
That sounds more like an inner voice kind of grappling with yourself and being skeptical about yourself.
Now the next question is, so you have this experience where you perceive it as someone communicating with you. We won't necessarily have to label it telepathic or whatever, but in your head, how do you determine that voice is anything other than you and what your brain does? And then after you've determined that it's something other than you and what your brain does, how did you determine that it's likely to be a god as opposed to some technology you don't understand?
Yeah. So for me, I'm always in my head, if you know what I mean. You're constantly listening to yourself and how you talk to yourself. Does that make sense? And the God voice in my head, as it were, it doesn't talk to me in that same tone, as it were.
Are you saying like the same pitch and the same reasoning that you would normally talk to yourself with?
Basically. Okay. You know, I'm not sure how to describe it. It's like how I know that Jen's voice and Matt's voice are different. They just sound different.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Sure. But the thing is, you have a normal... Let's get away. We'll call it a voice.
Yeah.
And we're using that incredibly loosely. So there's a normal voice, tone, thought process, whatever, that goes on in the internal dialogue that you tend to have with yourself.
I would prefer to use it.
And then there's something that you sense as different in quality about a second internal dialogue that doesn't appear to you to be you talking with you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Have you talked to a therapist, a psychologist at all to determine whether or not you're suffering from schizophrenia, from
other mental
any sort of other mental aberrations that might account for this?
Actually, you know, I have, you know, and as far as, you know, we've been able to tell, it doesn't seem like it's a schizophrenic type of thing.
Cool. So you've got some inner dialogue that's you and another inner dialogue that you don't feel
that
is
is not
you.
you.
How do you figure out what that other inner dialogue is?
What do you mean? I'm sorry, I didn't quite parse that.
Okay. So in the way that you can tell the difference between Jen's voice and my voice, you can tell the difference between these two inner dialogues, you talking with you versus you talking with what you perceive to be God.
Mm-hmm.
How did you determine that it is in fact something other than you and rather than just another way that your brain might communicate with itself?
That's the question I was going to get to.
I would have let you.
Yeah. Well, here we going.
I don't want to waste time, and basically from that's a good question. You know, I'm going to have to think about that.
Sure.
Since you know, y'all are running out of time, I'll just say bye. It was great talking to you.
Thank you for calling.
Thanks a lot. Have a great day.
Thanks, Alonzo. It's one of those things where not everybody can be an expert in like test methodology and other stuff. I have a particular set of skills, having done hardware and software QA for a good number of years, having spent a lot of time analyzing arguments and looking for flaws, and looking at the assumption, and as being a magician since I was 3, I know how people fool themselves, and I know the questions that they don't ask, because the magician's job quite often is to close the doors on those questions so that if you ask them, they seem, oh no, that can't
mystical
be that. Let me move over here. They sometimes get
illusion.
Sometimes gets inappropriately labeled as misdirection, but it's just direction. We're directing you in certain ways so that you're not over here. When you say, hey, I've had these experiences and I put them to the test, okay.
I've always loved that. I put them to the test. How?
What were the tests? Show me the tests, because the same thing that we're hearing from Alonzo, we would hear from someone who thinks that they speak with the dead.
Yes. Or somebody that speaks with the dead, or somebody that I've seen speak with pets, or people. Those crack me up. I'm like, wow, you can translate me out now. That's fantastic. Or somebody that is saying that not even the dead, but not God, but spirits and angels, they speak to them. And
there's a lot of things.
It's $1 million industry for people that do this shit too.
Yep.
But to me, this sounds like just a different internal monologue. I know myself. Go and do it. No, honey, can we not, please? 2 totally different friggin' voices. They sound like me, but they're pitch. And one is the reasonable one, and one's the stupid teenager that will never leave me. But
I did that yesterday. I wanted to get a 12-string guitar because I've wanted one forever, and I don't have one.
Yes, the guitar.
And so I went up and I played around. There was the angel me and the devil me sitting on my shoulders, and of course I'm being figurative. But yeah, we do stuff like that.
Right,
but it could be that
there are weird
values.
Well, I heard God speak to me. No, honey, you heard yourself speak to you, and this is a rational way to work out the things that you need to work out in your head. Why are you taking the credit from yourself for that?
It would be nice. The thing is, I can't prove that it's him talking to himself.
Right.
But that's not the problem. The problem is he's convinced it's not.
It's not.
And how did you reach that conclusion? And so there's a problem of people not asking the right questions. I just posted a video the other day that begins with a question. You should watch the whole video at some point. But why do mirrors reverse things left to right instead of top to bottom? For some people, they've never heard that question before, and they hear it, and they're like, wow, that is weird. Because, I mean, you can turn the mirror and everything else. And it turns out it's the wrong question. Because mirrors, we don't reverse things left to right.
No.
But I'll let you dig through that with myself or other people's videos to find out.
That was an interesting video. That was good.
All right. We got, we're actually going to probably end up running a little bit over time.
A little over time.
Theo in Illinois, somebody else who's had an experience.
Keep my show.
With God, I suppose.
Yes. I had what I would consider an experience with God. When I was 14 years old, I was basically praying. The number 7 is kind of meaningful to me. So I thought that, at 14 years old, that's like 2 sevens. It's not that important. But anyway, I thought I was like looking at the rest of my life and where I was going in my life. And I wanted to make a connection with God. And so I was like asking God for his or her feelings about myself and, what God thought about me and what is my future with you, God, because, my life is really about a relationship with you. That's the important thing. And at that moment, I experienced a lot of amazing feelings that flowed into my soul, I would say. And it was an experience like no other. I've had experiences since that time, but it was truly an incredible experience. And later, looking into many different spiritual teachings, I have found a way to kind of qualify what happened to me. And I believe that was, in fact, kind of a communion with God. And I believe that everyone can have it. And furthermore, that God does speak only through feelings, that when you have someone like an audible voice through your ears or in your mind, which I think you can experience that in your mind, that would be a spirit or some other entity, but it wouldn't be God. So I would say that because of evidence.
So you need to talk to the last caller.
Yeah,
because you
we
think
kind of rolled into two the same with this one.
Because it's, you had an experience and you're convinced that God only talks through emotion.
Correct.
Okay. So how did you become did you become convinced of that? Because you're basically saying that the last caller.
I have a quick question. Has God ever made you feel something you didn't want to feel for the question you were asking him or her?
Has he ever made me feel?
Yes, you said that God communicates, with love and through feeling. Have you ever prayed to God or asked God a question and it wasn't the feeling that you wanted? Say you were praying to get your ex back, or are you and your ex going to work out? Did you ever have the feeling of, nope, it's not?
No.
So the only thing you felt with God communicating with you is the answer you wanted.
No, I wasn't necessarily I wasn't like expecting a particular result. What I experienced was nothing like I could have really imagined.
Okay, so you had said that, hold on, you had said that you had asked what your relationship with God is going to be and what God has in store for you, and you felt something fantastic and something rushed and something beautiful. Have you ever had a time when you didn't feel something good from that?
Yeah, if I could just take a few seconds to answer that question. I would say that there have been times where I have been frustrated in my attempts to communicate with God, but at those moments, it was more like there's nothing from God. Like where I might be asking something, nothing comes.
What you're saying is when you're trying to communicate with God, you seem to get the answer you're most hopeful for. The feeling you're most hopeful for, the answer you're most hopeful for.
I wouldn't say that.
Okay, so you ask God questions and God communicates with emotion, and sometimes you don't get an answer.
Yeah.
Okay. How do you know that God communicates only with emotion?
I'm not sure.
Well, then you don't know.
Yeah, I don't believe I said that I knew, but I...
Okay,
I
why would you believe that God only communicates with emotion?
I've been wondering about that for a long time because people, they want something very tangible. And of course, when you hear words, that's a very tangible thing. I actually have heard words, but I don't believe
but feelings can be tangible too.
Words are intangible.
Feelings can be more overpowering than words could ever be. And that's why I had asked, has there ever been a point where you've wanted to communicate with God and it's been an answer you didn't want to feel?
Which wouldn't be surprising because that happens all the time.
Right.
So you believe that God communicates through feelings, and when I ask why do you believe that? I don't get an answer.
I believe I did answer you.
But how do you know that the voices that you hear?
Why do you believe that God only communicates through emotions?
It's something that I've heard in my research.
Okay, I definitely think if we rewind the call, the words, it's something I've heard from my research, never left your mouth. But if God only communicates by emotions, what is this research and how did it come about?
When I talk about my research, what I'm saying is that it's things that I've looked into after having these experiences.
Okay.
Basically
what have you
looked into, though, specifically?
I've looked into a lot of things. I could tell you in respect to what the topic we're talking about, I found someone who suggests that, what happened to me was in fact an experience with God. And this is someone who claims to be Jesus.
Oh, boy.
So what?
Okay.
Are they Jesus? How could you prove it?
Boy.
What does it matter what somebody told you?
It does matter if you're seeking truth. It does matter because.
But is this the truth?
You're not seeking truth.
Or is the truth you're seeking truth that you want? Is what I'm asking. Is it the truth because you want it to be the truth? Is this the feeling you got because this is the feeling?
I would say no, Jen. I would say that I while I do hope that certain things are the answers that I want, I do resist that, and I say, I want what is true. I want that.
But you don't.
But you don't.
I can tell you that with strong confidence. You think you're seeking the truth, but you're not, because you don't know anything about how to go about finding truth. When I ask you, how do you know God only communicates with emotion? It's because somebody who claims they're Jesus told you that.
Somebody who, yeah.
That's not a path to truth. I'm
not disagreeing.
Theo, I'm Jesus, and I don't communicate with just emotion. Do you believe me?
I don't believe that you're Jesus because nothing that you have said suggests that. I believe that.
So do you think that anything anybody has ever said that they were Jesus could be Jesus?
I'm sorry, what's that?
Does anybody that say, hey, I'm Jesus, and kind of live some moral code that's akin to Jesus, would you believe that they were Jesus?
Well, that's the problem.
Yeah.
So somebody tells you you're Jesus, how do you determine that they are?
Yeah, I would say it has a lot to do with the moral code, whether they...
What makes you think that Jesus has a particular moral code?
I believe that God has a moral code. And
what makes you believe that God has a particular moral code?
Because I see nature working in such a manner to bring about order.
What the hell does nature bringing about order have to do with God having a moral code?
I don't see.
Nature's pretty immoral if you want to step outside and take a look real quick. And
amoral.
Amoral. Thank you. Nature's pretty amoral if you want to take outside and step outside and take a look real quick.
The point is, in order for you to reach a conclusion that this person that's talking to you is Jesus, you have to have some mental model of a Jesus to compare it to.
Right.
And how do you know that your mental model of Jesus is right? Isn't that just coming from you?
Well, I don't know, but, it's within reason to attempt to, find the answer.
It's within reason to attempt to find the answer, but you don't have any path that could lead you to conclude that you have actually found the answer.
And that you are convinced.
You have no way of...
I do, Matt.
No, you don't.
You don't.
I asked you for it, and what you gave me was garbage.
Okay, Matt.
Do you not understand why? How did you tell that this person is in fact Jesus?
I can't tell for certain. That's another thing that I would put in.
Why on earth would you believe that they're Jesus? And when they communicate,
a lot of what he has said has proven true to me.
Is Jesus God? Hang on. Is Jesus God?
No.
He's not God.
Okay, so
no, he's a man.
Okay.
Okay.
I don't believe in the Trinity. I believe that's a false teaching.
Did you get that from Jesus?
Yeah.
Okay, so if Jesus, hang on, if Jesus isn't God, what difference does it make what Jesus says about God? How does Jesus have any information about God? Because you said it was about Jesus' moral character, and you said it was about God's moral character. So you're either saying that Jesus is God or that Jesus has some special tie to God. How did you demonstrate that?
How do I demonstrate whether Jesus has a tie to God? I would say that Jesus has more love and more wisdom.
How do you prove that?
Based on what?
And why would you think that's the case, and how would you prove it?
I would say that what Jesus brought, what he taught, was very profound, and it's influence.
Wait, are you talking about the Jesus that you talked to, or the Jesus in the Bible?
The Bible.
I'm talking about the same in both cases.
How do you know it's the same? So you're talking to Jesus nowadays.
I don't know.
Hang on, Theo. You're talking to Jesus nowadays, and he's not God, and yet he's the same as the person that was speaking in the Bible.
Right.
How the fuck is that possible?
How's that possible?
Well, there's a few ways. I can tell you a whole thing.
Give me one.
Yeah.
If you're interested.
Give us your favorite one. Huh? Top argument that you can absolutely stand behind.
I'll give you one that I can stand behind. I can't give you one that I can stand behind for certain.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
If you're not going to stand behind it, don't call in to tell me that you're talking to Jesus.
Yeah, and if you're just going to, well, this and well, that and well, this and well, that, no. Just research a bit more before you call the damn show. Please.
It's really easy. If you've got something that you believe, what we ask is tell us what you believe and why.
Why?
People call in and they tell us what they believe, and when we start trying to get to the why, inevitably we find a bunch of bad ideas. And it's not that you're an idiot. It's not that you're particularly irrational. It's you haven't thought about the things that how do you know? If somebody says, how do you know that's Jen? I can give answers. I can look at her driver's license. I've interacted with, how do I know that's not a clone of Jen?
Ooh,
I don't.
We don't know.
And I wouldn't pretend to. And yet you are calling in to say that you're talking to Jesus. He's not God, but he's the same guy that was in the Bible a couple thousand years ago.
No matter what you're hoping to feel, you wind up feeling when you talk to this person. No,
it's God. It's God that's giving him emotion. Jesus is the one telling him about God. Whoever this dude Jesus is that you're interacting with who's telling you about God, get some damn credentials and find out how he knows so much about God before you just start accepting what he says about God. Because there's plenty of people, there's no shortage of people who will tell you what they think God is or wants.
Well, it's like celebrities.
That's how every religion is.
It's like celebrities. You can go out and say, I speak for this celebrity. But if you come to Time, even the Inquirer, which does fact check shit, even they'll turn around and be like, are you a representative of this person? What gives you the right to speak on this for this person?
If somebody told you I said something, you better double check, especially if you're going to call in and tell me what I said, because even people who listened to me seem to get it wrong with what I actually said. But that's my failure as a communicator. Last call, Joseph. Thanks for waiting. You're on with Jen and Matt.
Hey, Joseph.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we're here. We're actually
we're past our time.
We are past the time, but we saved a little extra. We're going a little over for you.
Okay. Well, anyway, you remember me on Joseph who talked about Bill, right?
Yeah.
Atheists online, they make comments on that Bill video. It just makes me think that atheists, they can't read people correctly because they couldn't read me correctly. Nearly all of the atheists on the comment section said, Joe needs help. Joe needs professional help. I am a psychiatrist and I am 100% certain that this guy needs to seek professional psychological help.
So whoever said that is probably a shitty psychiatrist or psychologist because they shouldn't be engaged in that sort of diagnosis over an internet video. That said, while a lot of people would suggest that, I don't necessarily disagree with them based on the content and the emotion of the last call. But today you were calling in to ask about near-death experiences.
Well, I do want to say something with that. I understand that it can hurt getting criticism for the content that you put out or something that you really poured your heart into. But sometimes it helps to take a step back and instead of saying, how could they say this about me, ask why. And learn that there may be a better form of communication to get your point across.
Well, I know that they've said things. I know that they've said things like, oh, there's so much distress in his voice. Oh, he's got some nervous laughter. Like, that's absolutely not true.
It's happening literally right now.
I had to take a step back real quick and went, oh boy. Okay.
Hang on, pause. I'm not trying to be mean to you or anything else. People are going to say mean things. Some are going to be right, some are going to be wrong. You can pay attention to them or not. But that particular thing is something that I noticed during the call, which is why Jenna and I backed off and reassessed things. And what everybody here in the studio and watching is it literally happened as you were saying it. Now, that doesn't mean that you're broken and in need of psychotherapy or electric shock treatment or whatever else. It is a recognition of a trait that you have, which may or may not be a problem, but is, in people's experiences, symptomatic of something. And so maybe they're not necessarily trying to be mean. I'm not trying to be mean now when I said it's literally happening right now. I'm acknowledging a fact. And, you can either not be aware of it, or maybe it's something that you're so used to that you don't see it the way that is what people were talking about, is what happened right then.
Right, and being mindful of, okay, this is something that I do, let's be a little more mindful of it, and maybe the message won't come across the way that it has been.
But you don't got to change you.
Yeah, no.
What do you got?
What's up? So, what's up with today, Joe?
Yeah, so my question is, why don't you just simply believe people who have near-death experiences?
I'm happy to believe that people are generally honestly conveying their understanding of an experience they have.
Right.
But that doesn't mean, and first of all, near-death experience, it's not, I mean, I wouldn't say it's not remarkable, but I mean, there's been enough study in this and enough people claiming it. So when somebody claims a near-death experience, I'm happy to believe that they were near death.
Yes.
And that they experienced something. It's their story and their interpretation of the events that happen and what conclusions they reach from them that are possible. Just like when somebody tells me they were abducted by aliens, I don't believe they were actually abducted by aliens. I believe they had an experience, and that's the best explanation that they're able to come up with.
And it was a series of brain processes that could be translated into something spiritual or supernatural, that your brain was coping with this. Not so much that you actually walked down the light at the end of a tunnel.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, I mean, because if you look at people who have near-death experiences, you watch their interviews, I mean, first of all, a lot of them corroborate one another, but...
No. So that's true for alien abductions as well?
Right. And that's very much, I mean, that can be counted as towards religion. We told one story and other people...
And some of them have admitted that they lied and faked it?
Right.
And so if we know that people can be dishonest about it, and we know that people can be wrong about it, how do we tell when somebody's actually accurately describing what actually happened?
Well, I just think that, there have been so many near-death experiences that...
Do you think people are being abducted by aliens? Didn't we ask this last time?
I don't. I don't.
But there's been so many of them.
But there's been so many of them.
And they corroborate each other.
And yeah, the stories sound the same.
So why don't you just believe them?
And I'm a little skeptical when, for some reason, something that we have yet to understand, everybody seems to have the same story. Yeah, I'm going to be a little more skeptical of that. There's no variations.
Oh, there's tons of variations.
Well, small ones, but nobody ever.
They're not even all about the same religious experience.
Right, but it's always the light at the end of the tunnel. It's not.
It's been a light at the end of the tunnel frequently since the first book about a light at the end of the tunnel was popular.
Came out, right? And
just like the description of aliens have been almond big head, almond eyes.
Great people.
Since Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Prior to that, aliens were robots and furry things. Go back and look at, the day the universe, or not the day the universe
Humanoids
changed.
with black eyes was a big one, too. The black-eyed children.
Well, yeah. But I mean, you look at the progression of aliens, it became canonized after Close Encounters. Right. And the near-death experiences became canonized after we started publishing stories about them and the media started reporting on them. And now, if you want your story to be taken seriously, it needs to fit within the canon. Otherwise, you're just a nut. So if you say, I died on the table and was out for a minute and a half, and when they, while they were doing work on me, I traveled and I went to a land where there were fairies and dragons and leprechauns, and everything was this wonderful unicorn color, but everything tasted like poop. When you come back and you tell that story, nobody's going to take you seriously.
No.
But if you come back and tell a story about a light at the end of the tunnel and seeing loved ones and feeling peace and joy,
warmth and yellow and all that,
or that you went to something that fits somebody's description of a hell or an afterlife that's common, all of a sudden people take you more seriously.
And that's what makes me skeptical about it, because it makes it very easy to lie about it.
But the other thing is,
the template's already there.
You don't have to be lying. If you've been indoctrinated into a culture, this is the type of story that your brain will make up based on the information you already have. So how do I tell the difference between somebody who actually went to heaven and somebody who just thinks they went to heaven?
Whose brain was going through something extremely traumatic.
Doesn't matter what the brain was doing. Well, how do I tell the difference between somebody who actually went to heaven and somebody who thinks they went to heaven? I don't know either, Joseph, but thanks.
Thanks, Joseph.
All right, that's it for the call.
That was interesting tonight. Okay.
Godless Bitches is going to start up as soon as we're done here. I don't know if we're hanging out on the Discord or not. Somebody's going to tell me.
Not sure, but it will be on the same stream. No Discord tonight.
No Discord tonight.
Yep.
Godless Bitches is getting ready to start here in just a minute. Thanks, Jen.
Thank you.
Yay! Hey. And thanks to everybody who showed up and the people on the other side of that wall.
Thank our crew, because they're amazing. Please.
Welcome to 2020. Thank the crew. Thanks to our patrons. And here's Godless Bitches.
Here's Godless Bitches. Thank you.
What are we doing, man? What are we doing?
No, you're done.
Hello and welcome to Godless Bitches. Today we're talking about religious education in the public school system, and we're going to be discussing a little bit about the upcoming Supreme Court case that's going to be argued, I believe, January 22nd. And that might be before or after this episode comes out, but either way, you're going to get a lot of information about past precedent and about kind of why we should be concerned about this and why this should be on our radar. So for the last 50 years or so, the United States Supreme Court and nearly every state in the U.S. Have argued over the right to religious instruction and indoctrinations in public schools, from school prayer to displaying the Ten Commandments and In God We Trust on walls and on buildings, and even restricting access to scientific information like course curriculum and textbooks. We're kind of forced to ask ourselves, are we violating the Establishment Clause or free speech rights in teaching children religious belief in publicly funded institutions and endorsing participation in Christian culture?
And so before we can talk about that, we have to talk about what the Establishment Clause actually is, because I, for one, don't know.
Okay, perfect.
The Establishment Clause is first part of the First Amendment. It's prohibiting the government from establishing any religion. This is our country's religion, any formal religion. And it also prevents the government from endorsing one religion over the other and remaining a non-neutral ground for land of the free, home of the brave, includes religious freedom.
Right.
That's what falls under the Establishment Clause.
This is one of the amendments?
This is part of the very first one.
It's part of the very first one.
Part of the first one.
Right.
Oh, okay.
It's kind of right.
So
I think it's like the first two lines.
Okay.
The First Amendment.
And this is part of the great American experiment.
Mm-hmm.
There was no. This was a new idea to have a country that was founded outside of a religious structure.
Right.
And so that's why we care so much about it, because this is what we were fighting for in the founding of this country.
It can also be argued that a large part of the immigration influx in the 1700s and 1800s were escaping religious persecution.
Exactly.
To go to a place where they can practice whatever they believed in freely.
So the Establishment Clause was put in later.
No, that was part of the original Ten Amendment.
It was one of the very first
beginning.
things handled, because they were deathly afraid of it turning into England,
Right.
where people were being beheaded and hung, drawn, and quartered for just being Catholic or Protestant. Or
Right, depending on who the ruler was, suddenly that was the
monarch
country's religion, and everybody else was persecuted for not adhering to it.
Oh, so you're saying that this country was intended to be secular?
Oh, it's almost like that.
Almost like that. Almost like they came here fleeing from religious persecution to practice whatever the hell they wanted.
That was impressive. All right, so before we jump into the court case that's being heard this month, we do want to talk a little bit about past precedent and give you kind of the whole scale picture of the battle that has been being fought for the right to protect our children from indoctrination in public school.
And also for you guys to have the same kind of, we're arguing this shit again.
Yeah.
Right.
Feeling that we all have.
It's an ongoing battle. It doesn't stop.
Like, really? The first one I can remember was Engel versus Vitale, which authorized a short, it was in the New York State Board of Regents. Shocking, New York, right? Authorized a short voluntary morning prayer, which was non-denominational. And people were like, no, this was clearly Christian driven. They weren't allowing children to have Muslim prayer during various points of the day. Clearly, we're favoring one religion over the other.
Right, non-denominational is
non-denominational.
Right.
Right.
And so they brought this to the Supreme Court, I believe, right?
It was 6-1. They voted that this absolutely violated the fucking Establishment Clause, saying, no, we shouldn't be having children praying in schools at all. Non-denominational, denominational, public schools. We should clarify public schools.
Right.
1962, I believe.
So they knew this in the 60s.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah, this was kind of it kind of came with the flower child 60s spiritual awakening.
Yeah, the 60s and 70s was kind of the beginning of what we consider to be the evangelical conservative Christian movement as we understand it today. Prior to that, there really wasn't that same political force that they had. And so as you'll see all of these take place in the 60s through the 80s.
We should also touch on the fact that during the Cold War, the 50s and 60s, the reason why God became so infused in this country is the USSR were communist. And the way that they bolstered that we were better than people was these godless commies.
Exactly.
And we have God on our side, and we have God protecting us, so we are going to be safe from the Soviets. And this is where In God We Trust became so popular, and now we have to pray in schools, and praying in school became just as important as bomb drills.
Interesting.
Well, the under God part of the Pledge of Allegiance was added around the same time.
Right around the same time, right.
Yeah, which is why today, if you're wondering, you hear so much connection between atheism and communism. Like, oh, you're an atheist, you must also be a communist, or
socialists.
Socialist.
That's a new word.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's kind of a holdover from the 1950s, 1960s
Right,
Cold War era.
McCarthyism
Yeah,
era, right.
for sure. So that was that. And then I know that there was one in 1963 with Madeleine Murray O'Hair as well.
Yes, and that one got lumped into, it's more known as the Schempp case, Schempp versus Pennsylvania, which fell along the same lines, except Madeleine Murray O'Hair argued that her son specifically should not be forced to participate in prayer in public schools. Prayer should not be an option, even if the children do not want to participate in this. They were hearing a case at the same time, so they lumped it into the Schempp case, which was also Pennsylvania stating that, hey, our kids are being forced to pray in school. SCOTUS said again, this violates First Amendment. Children should not be praying in a public school system that is funded by government money.
Right, which is the distinction.
And this was the bold move of, we're going to be a Christian nation. Our kids are going to pray in school and specifically ask God to protect them. 2-3 cases later, guess what? Now we have to find other tactics.
Right.
Now we're going to get into smaller laws.
Switching things up.
Text of everything.
Yeah. So once prayer had been banned effectively in public schools, and those first tactics of, okay, we're going to ask for this right out of the gate.
The strong arm,
right?
Is what I like to call it.
So states and religious organizations then had to use subtler tactics and kind of come at it from the side to try and get their way in. So I know there are a couple other cases that kind of stemmed from that.
Stone versus Graham. This was, we're going to play with this a little bit. We're not going to outright have the kids pray. We're not going to sit here and tell the kids that God is the way to go. We're just going to display the 10 Commandments in schools, so that every time a child looks up, whether it be the front door, in a hallway, wherever the hell they're putting it, they're, as they're mindlessly going through their school day, they've got the 10 Commandments being looked at them. The Supreme Court said, are you actually kidding me right now? Like, now it's an actual Bible quote that's on the wall. Sorry, we can't do this. However, we've learned how to play with language in this country. And because In God We Trust is now considered our national motto, states like Tennessee, which I've experienced personally, South Dakota, I believe possibly Mississippi, has now turned around and put In God We Trust. And the state law is that it has to be displayed prominently in a school where people can access it. I know when I've walked into my son's school, it's right there at the front door. It's an In God, and it's placed so patriotically and beautifully. It's the Statue of Liberty in black and white with, the rustling waves of New York Harbor, and then In God We Trust as soon as you hit the door. And then it's in every hallway. Because by state law, we now have to, the school cannot say no. It is now state law that it has to be prominently displayed somewhere in the school.
That's current?
Current.
A current law.
That's a current law in about 4 or 5 states now.
Yeah. I remember one school, I don't remember which one exactly, had they got around that by just putting a dollar bill in a frame on the wall. It's like, yeah, technically.
Oh, you know what? I think that's when my son finally leaves his school. I think that's the gift I'm going to give them. It's just a dollar bill in a frame. Just put that right on the front desk. But it's you walk into the building. Now they have a series of doors, so it's on the first door, and then you have to go through the second door, and then it's on the front desk too.
It sounds to me like in the first two, it sounds like the Supreme Court is aware that
we can't.
This is wrong.
Yeah.
This is not okay. Yeah. And it seems like 5 years later, they're like, just kidding. We don't really think that. And then years later, they're like, oh, just kidding. We don't really think that either. And it's like, so
because it comes down to language.
Why are they able to set a precedent on something if they can't? If it's just weak?
Well, the thing is, a goal would be to make sure you're not overstepping and making it easier for other cases later on to be promoted. So, for example, if you made it legal if you sanction school prayer, the concern then is that other religions would use that same ruling to force your kid to pray to Allah, or to pray to Satan or whatever, and so that's the concern. And they're like, okay, we can't say that you can promote school prayer. Like that's not something we can do because we're scared of what precedent that's going to create on.
But
it only talks about that specific thing. If they come at it from a slightly different angle, then they can argue a whole bunch of other reasons for it.
It's very much, Mommy said I can't touch the stovetop because I'm going to burn my hand, but I can put my hand on the oven door. Can I put my hand on the oven door?
Right, and then there has to be a whole other negotiation about when you phrase it this way.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
a semantics game, but we're back to that.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
I understand now. Okay.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I think we can...
But that's why this is so important that we understand this, is because we are ultimately the people that are in control of how this actually turns out. Right?
For the most part, as long as we're, voting.
Well, because we elect the people that go and represent us. And so if we're a country that doesn't understand how this works, then, it can go to where we could have the worst president ever, right?
Yeah.
Because we don't know how this works.
Right. And that president picks our Supreme Court justice.
Right.
Yeah.
So.
And that's what we want to do with Kavanaugh.
Okay.
And so what we are, the thing is, okay, so saying something violates free speech, for example, is different than saying you can't place an image here, because that's a different concept altogether.
Right.
So then you have to think, okay, so the reason people were okay with In God We Trust in schools is because they were like, well, it's already part of our motto from 1955. So it's clearly secular. So it's not a religious thing. So we had to put it there. So it is all, it's semantics. It's trying to get your win in. But the argument there is that, well, it's not religious. It's part of our culture. It's part of our heritage.
But when it comes down to the Ten Commandments, it says, well, we're not forcing the kids to pray. We're not forcing them to take a break from their day and pray. It's just in the classroom like any other poster.
Right, exactly. Except it's 10 times more prominent on the front door.
Yeah, exactly. Okay.
Do you know what's something very interesting, though? I watched the documentary Hail Satan.
Oh.
It's so good.
I haven't seen it.
Amazing. It talks about the Satanic Temple's activism and how they use it to thwart certain religious favoring rules. Because, again, people are like, okay, put 10 Commandments up. I'm also putting a statue of Baphomet up. Never mind.
Yeah.
Like suddenly everyone is okay with taking them both down. But the interesting thing I found out there, that a lot of the 10 Commandments monuments that you see on courthouses and like on public land were actually part of a promotional stunt for the movie, The 10 Commandments.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And Cecil B. DeMille paid to have these things erected as part of a movie production stunt. And then they just stayed.
Oh my God.
People don't know that. And so they're like, oh, this valuable, really impressive, like meaningful monument is going to be torn up. Like, no, it was a publicity stunt.
This is Cloverfield gone bad. No. But it's displaying our Christian nature. And it's like, no, Charlton Heston just wanted to make money.
Yep, basically
that's all. That's all it was.
Again, that's why that In God We Trust on the dollar bill is so prominent. It's like, it's about the money.
It's about the money. And I mean, let's what are you going to do? You go to your kid's school, right? You drop your kid off at school to go to work, to make money. That says In God We Trust, to go put it in the collection basket. What do we think this shit is about? Come on.
So another way that they're trying to get more religious instruction to school is by restricting or changing the kinds of textbooks and curriculum that their students use, which I think of all of them is the most insidious, because this is actively tampering with, what our kids are learning,
especially at an impressionable age where they don't have the brain development to distinguish fact from fiction. Well, this is why kids have imaginary friends.
Some adults don't either.
Granted, but it's fully expected for a kid to have an imaginary friend because we're like, kids lie a little bit because they kind of have a hard time distinguishing from the truth and reality. And then
kind
it's
of
like,
expected for many adults to have an imaginary friend too.
Well, I think some adults would be better off with more imaginary friends. I know I would, but
I know that we believe in evolution, right? And I mean, I think that it's pretty obvious, but these people think that it's pretty obvious that creationism is the way. And so they honestly believe that that's the reality. So how do we prove to them that this is important? Like, without having that religious discussion, which you can't really do in government.
Peer-reviewed articles that they're never going to read. That's how we prove it to them.
Yeah, the issue here is, I think to get on a quick little tangent, is the use of the word believe, really,
right,
in this case. Because we can say we believe in evolution, but that doesn't have the same meaning as believe in creationism. That's a category error, I believe. So what you're doing is using the same word, but it means different things. For us, we take the evidence to inform us to make an informed decision, backed up by all scientists, really.
Okay.
And that's how we're using believe when we say that. And that is objectively a better way to approach things like instruction and public school.
You will meet the argument of, well, evolution is a theory, so why can't creationism be a theory?
And then you sit down with them and you get coffee.
And then after slow blinking,
you say,
after about slow blinking 25, 30,000 times, hey, let's go get some coffee and let me explain to you how scientific theories work.
Well, I didn't know until recently. I didn't know the difference between a theory and a theory. You know,
right? But when you do figure it out, you know how you get that.
Yeah, I've gotten that look many times.
Oh, yay, podcast.
And you don't mean to make people feel bad. You don't mean to make you feel bad. You're just like, oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Okay.
Yeah, but that's one thing that they have been trying to do is make sure of the restrictions. And this was especially prevalent in the 70s. And
is now making a resurgence.
Unfortunately, yes. Especially here in Texas, there's a whole debate about that. Yes. Actually, that just happened a couple of years ago.
2017, I believe. And that was Texas HB 1485, which was passed. And I know we shouldn't be reading things from a computer, but I need to get this out properly. HB 1485 would allow teachers the academic freedom to encourage students discussing and coming to conclusions other than science-based facts on things like global warming, evolution, and the quote-unquote, and this was in quotes in the bill, chemical origins of life.
They were in quotes in the bill.
As well as human cloning. It was in quotes in the bill. While HB 1485 prohibits teachers from endorsing religious-based beliefs, this is, and this was the argument made against it, this is a very slippery slope in having young students coming to conclusions other than fact-based evidence in school, in a classroom. They are allowing children who have not been taught about this to discuss amongst themselves whether or not evolution is real without teacher intervention other than, hey, little Timmy, don't yell and throw things at your classmates because you think he's going to hell. They are allowing children to say, this is what I believe, and the teacher has to sit there and say, well, that may be. That's okay, little Susie.
That's the experience I had.
Yeah, well...
Wait, like in actual public school?
Mm-hmm.
Really?
Whoa.
Yeah, actually, I was in 6th grade, and I got a kid in trouble for saying, oh my God.
Really?
And I remember, I was such a little brat. This girl got really mad. She just went, oh. And I just remember looking at her and going, it's for your own good.
Oh, no.
Yeah, because that's what I was told.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
You
I remember
can't say
getting
that.
grounded for saying, oh, my God.
Yeah, that's a bad word.
Yeah.
Oh, my God. You know?
I can't relate. I'm from
That
New
was in
York.
public
We said
school.
way worse than oh my God at that age. Like way, way, way worse than that.
No, but this actually did set a really bad precedent because this past November in 2019, Ohio passed the Ohio Student Religious Liberties Act of 2019. And really, I feel like anytime religious liberty is in a bill anywhere, you just have to triple check it. Just keep an eye on those because this is really bad. This is allowing students to give false answers on tests that correspond with their religious beliefs, even if it's factually inaccurate. So if you are taking a biology test and someone is asking you about the chemical origins of life, you can write, didn't happen, 6,000 years ago, God said bang, and the teacher needs to count it.
God said bang, or that the earth is 6,000 years old.
So how do we fix this? I mean, do we get a bunch of scientists to come and say, hey, fix all this curriculum and tell these people what's up? Like, what do we do? Like, how do we...
We have to, I mean, most of these are passed by the state, and state elections would help with that. But again, a lot of these are...
They do help with that. And it comes up to standing up, one... look at what your kid, look at your kids' textbooks if you got kids in school. Take a look at them. I mean, my kid doesn't do textbooks anymore. I guess I'm old and I remember textbooks with.
Oh, they have computers now, don't they?
They have tablets. They have tablets.
Right.
But
Yeah,
I remember
I
the
heard
days
that.
of like folding the brown paper bag over the textbook. So I'm oldish, ladies and gentlemen. But he has these handouts that come home all the time. Mm-hmm. Take a look at what your kids are bringing home. Another thing I think we also need to touch on is the lemon test. And if you ever hear, this is the 3-pronged lemon test. If you ever hear of an issue with your child in public school, these are the 3 statutes they're named after plaintiff Alton Lemon, which details legislation concerning religion. The statute must have a secular legislative purpose. I can never say that word right.
Secular legislative.
The principal or primary effect of the statute must neither advance nor inhibit religion. And this is where religious people get caught up on, especially with what's wrong with teaching creationism? What's wrong? And it's not they never turn around and say, we're going to pull evolution out of the books. They never say that. It's, well
actually, they did. Epperson versus Arkansas.
Epperson versus Arkansas in 86, they tried to pull it straight. And I mean, it's Arkansas, so they're slightly behind the times on coming up to secularism.
These days, that wouldn't fly.
No, these days this wouldn't fly. But in 86, 30 years ago, they were trying to, and I believe SCOTUS said, no.
Yeah, that was considered
Are you kidding me?
First Amendment right.
Yeah, are you kidding me?
That is another thing that you can do, though. Keep an eye on what your kids are reading, but also go to court. Contact the Freedom from Religion Foundation. They have lawyers who are there to help you sue your school, your local area, your government, these court cases, these precedents that are extremely helpful and validating do not come into existence without the people who are going to court to defend their rights.
And I will say the final 2 are where we get the most entanglement. The principal primary effect of the statute must neither advance nor inhibit religion, also known as the effect prong. This is where the religious right argues, well, if you're not teaching about our religion, it's inhibiting the lessons in us practicing our religion. Number 3 is the statute must not result in excessive government entanglement with religion. What they're saying is, well, if we get the government involved in these teachings, aren't we having the government excessively entangled in our religion?
Okay, so that covers past precedent a little bit. Now let's talk about the court case that's currently on the books to be argued in the Supreme Court on January 22nd. The highlight is Espinoza versus Montana Department of Revenue, and this is from CNN. The controversy stems from a student aid program created by the Montana legislature in 2015 that allows individuals in the state to donate up to $150 to a scholarship organization and receive a tax credit. The organization then uses these donations to fund scholarships at qualifying private schools. Soon after this was released, the Montana Department of Revenue adopted a regulation that excluded religiously affiliated schools specifically from the program in order to maintain compliance with the free exercise clause. And 3 parents who had been planning on using these scholarships for Christian schools sued the Montana Department of Revenue. And so that is the current case. The Montana Supreme Court said that it did violate the First Amendment and deactivated the program. The current presidential administration told the Supreme Court that the state provision at issue violates the federal Constitution. So now they need to hear it at the Supreme Court on the 22nd.
Of January.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so we need to rewind. And what is the free exercise clause? What is that?
The free exercise clause basically says that you can't prohibit and you can't discriminate public funding based on religion. You can't turn around
based on religion.
Right. You can't say we're only going to distribute this to Christians, Muslims, whatever, and you can't say we're exclusively not distributing this to because you're Christian.
Okay.
Is what it is.
Okay.
Which kind of butts up against the Establishment Clause. And this is what they're arguing is, well, this is religious-based discrimination. These are religious schools. However, if we start providing funding, especially if they're a specifically Christian school, well, now now we're being able to say, okay, well, we're going to enforce Christian schools. This opens the door. Yes.
That's interesting. So basically, they're going to have to, they're not liking that they're discovering that they're going to have to drop the religious courses in order to become a federally funded school. And so they're saying,
or at least qualify for
we're
grants,
the same thing. These classes are just as valid, just as important. And so we should be seen as an equal level school, right?
In order to obtain funding, correct.
Right. This is more about the parents and children who are trying to get into the schools
Right.
rather than the schools themselves. The schools themselves are well aware of their ability to get or not get certain grants. But these are parents who are like, we want to use this grant that we got to send our kid to a Christian school. And the Montana legislature nixed that option for them.
Well, so then that's good.
Right. This isn't like Title I. Title I is federal grants that go towards schools who have a larger proportion of children living in poverty, and are lower performing or lower funded schools, so they push funding into these schools. This isn't for schools itself. These are for individual grants for children.
I see, okay.
And a lot of times it's used for charter schools is mainly where you see it. This is one of the first times I've heard about it actually being directly given to a school with a religious background. It's they're usually used towards charter schools, which a whole other episode we're going to do it another time because we've got a lot to say on that.
Yeah. So from the New York Times actually explained it like this. They ask whether states are free to erect a wall between church and state high enough to exclude religious groups from some state benefits. And they're calling it a proxy battle over school choice.
Mm-hmm.
So what if all there is available are religious schools? I mean, does proximity come into account at all?
That is a very good question.
That's a very good question. And the it's happening now where I'm at in Tennessee to where we don't have enough schools for the kids that are coming in.
Right.
Because the town is booming. And it's federally mandated that you have to have a certain amount of secular schools funded by the government in a certain demographic area with people. It has to be covered. They have to provide this.
So if all there is available is private schools, that's a failure on a government's part.
Then we take this
Correct.
to...
That's a whole other issue.
Separate.
Right.
Okay,
then we take this to the Department of Education.
Connecting dots here.
No, that's totally fine. That is a valid concern, and not just with schools. There's also concerns about hospitals being religiously affiliated.
Well, this is what's happening with charter schools now.
Right.
With charter schools, they're putting these charter schools in these residential areas. The schools are performing better because they have the money to perform better.
Right.
So these parents they're wanting to send their kids to charter schools, and they're getting the school choice vouchers for them. And the standard federal schools are having such a low enrollment that they're closing. And now the charter schools are getting too big. And the charter schools can pick what kid they want to come in. So we've
real quick, clarify for me the difference between public, private, and charter.
Charter and private are kind of the same.
Yeah.
I thought charter was kind of
Charter does
free.
I believe charter has limited state benefits.
They have limited state benefits, and they have to abide by a stricter guideline of education, curriculum, and
but they can receive scholarship.
Yes, I believe it's called the school choice program.
Yeah.
That parents can apply for. Their kids get the vouchers for them, and they apply them to the charter schools because it used to be selectively for higher privileged children. And people were like, this is fucked up,
Right.
But that's the problem that we're having is so many parents are pushing into these charter schools that the federal schools are closing down because of funding, because, they have low attendance. And now we're having a problem with kids in inner cities. Charter schools notoriously don't like taking disabled kids. They have quotas for minority children, and when they meet them, they don't accept them. So you've got kids going 2 hours away to school because that's what's available.
And then if we add on top of this, if this court case were to be ruled in favor of the parents, we have a whole other issue that would make this even harder because currently we have the Secretary of Education, Betsy DeVos, in office. And, that face.
We're going to have to come back and talk about who that is in a second.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll come back to Betsy. But no, the issue here is that federally funded public schools are already being drained of money, drained of resources. They aren't being supported enough. And if we were to put it on the books that the state and federal governments could fund specifically religious schools and get rid of that barrier between church and state, then all of that money, depending on who is the Secretary of Education, would be funneled towards religious schools or whatever group of schools that they wanted, it would take away that that level of anonymity,
that level of balance, right?
Even if you don't have any favor for religious schools and you're in the government working in that position, well, then it's easier to put more money in the private funded schools because they're already so established.
They have more money
They have more money,
yeah, absolutely.
And so it'd be easier to put those up to par.
And it's also
our standard.
Because of that funding, our states measure on testing. Every state has a, GMAC, whatever you want to call them, but they have a state standardized test. And
it's a STAR test here, right?
It's the STAR test here, which, yeah. Anybody wants to talk about that, you got me. I work in that. But they look at how well a state's performing on their standardized test and say, well, this state is doing better. So let's give them more money. It's an incentive bonus.
Ooh.
And this is what happened with the Common Core standards as well, Tennessee being one of them. Tennessee is a very low-performing state for education.
Okay.
Always has been.
And all of the private schools and charter schools and
they also
public schools are in the same pot?
Yes, they also have to issue the standardized testing.
And the same test?
The same test.
Okay.
Every kid in 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, they all get the same standardized test. But with Tennessee, they said, well, if you adopt Common Core, we'll give you more money. And
What's Common Core?
Common Core is a whole new set of learning.
Shit. We just got a whole new segment of the show.
No, but it's let me break it down this way.
We'll reel it back. We'll talk about Common Core.
Yeah, it's just a different way of computing and learning.
But the point is that they are able to put requirements and incentives on who gets the money. And right now, whether or not you are a religious school is not. You don't qualify for it based on religion because we put that wall up.
Because we put the wall of...
And because of this court case, that wall might start getting some more cracks.
I see. And it's a slippery slope because if we start saying, okay, we're going to fund religious education, are we endorsing this now? Is this going to be the standard set education for the country? Are we going to mandate our children to go to religious education schools?
So are we slippery sloping it?
Yes, I think so. We're kind of... Oh, look, there's an ice hill, and how slippery is it?
Well, no, I think she means in terms of whether or not we're using a fallacy here, in terms of fear-mongering.
Gotcha.
And it's difficult to talk about the slippery slope in terms of legislature and past precedent because it is literally a slippery slope. Depending on the definition and the decision that you get, you then get to use that to push other things.
Things
and that's
snowball
the whole
quickly.
point.
Yeah.
So it is a snowball effect, and calling that out, I don't think is technically a fallacy. Because we've seen it happen in the past. This is how this works. But that is a very good question for sure.
Well, because I'd always heard on, I don't know if you want to call it sides, but the way, with talking with my family, they would talk about how, in the legislature, if this is passed, then this will pass, then this will pass, then this will pass. And so when I started learning about fallacies and logic and all that, I was like, oh yeah, that's a slippery slope. They can't say that. And so I'm like, wait, okay, they kind of can.
Right, because we've actually got the voting records and backing and decisions that are like, oh, we see what happens when that happens. It's like you find the crack in the door with the ants.
Right. There's a difference between a slippery slope fallacy and the acknowledgement of cause and effect.
Right.
Okay, I see that. Okay.
Yeah.
So the big concern with this, with Betsy DeVos being in, is she is extremely religious.
Yeah.
And greedy.
So who is she?
She is the Secretary of Education.
And why is this significant?
She's in charge of the funding. She's in charge of what sets the curriculum.
For the entire country.
For the entire country. And she is one greedy bitch.
And it's all down to her. It's not like a panel of people like in other court, other judges.
They can make suggestions, but at the end of the day, she's like, no, I'm the Secretary of Education, and this is how this shit's going to come down, and this is what we're going to pass for it.
Is it interesting that we have groups of people in charge of things in government, but one person in charge of the principal, one secretary of this, one, one person?
And it comes down to we have to figure out a way to calm infighting. So if we have the one authoritarian.
Exactly. It's a
sorry, side note, just noticing
we're going to do this a lot, everyone. It's like, wait, side. Okay.
I'm very easily distracted, so.
We're good.
That's why we love her.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so this is getting scheduled for January 22nd.
Right.
And start hearing arguments for this.
So this doesn't come down to the panel of judges that the other Supreme Court stuff is. Oh,
now
this
it will.
Okay.
Now it will.
Yes, this
We took it away from Betsy.
Yes.
Yes. Although Betsy will then be able to use whatever this court decides to
set a
Ooh,
precedent.
okay.
Yeah.
Now, Betsy
I see.
DeVos, like I said, is very religious. And I don't know if you guys know the history of Betsy DeVos, but her husband made his fortune in the Amway company.
What's that?
Oh, no.
Oh, yes. Let me explain. Amway is the oldest and
They
biggest.
love how uninformed I am. Let me tell you.
Amway is the oldest and biggest MLM cult you'll ever come
Cult
across.
according to who?
Cult according to anybody who has fucking common sense in their goddamn head.
Okay.
But they are the insurance, you're going to get rich. We have to call it MLM. You know, you have your upline and your up person.
Okay.
And you have to, yeah.
Fun
that's
story.
it.
I was in Amway for like 5 months.
No.
As a college
I'm so
kid.
sorry. I'm so sorry.
It was fucking sketchy as fuck.
Are we going to have a whole nother show about how you got out?
Probably.
Yes, we should have.
Honestly, it was
Actually,
my
we should
lack
do
of
that.
ability to perform.
We're
I
not
was
even
like,
gonna
I
do
can't
religious
get on
deconversion.
the phone and talk to people. What are you talking about?
No, we're not even going to do religious deconversion. Now we're just solely going to focus on MLM deconversion.
They wanted
from
you
now.
to do like call center type stuff to reach out
To my
and
friends.
to
lure
your friends.
to sell them things.
And
They
to have them
came
work
to
under
my
you.
door
What kind of things
and
would you
sat in my
sell?
door.
Because I'm
That's
picturing
life insurance, I want to say is.
That's what I
Amway,
did.
right?
No.
That's what I did.
You did life insurance.
I
I'm
did
thinking
life insurance.
Primerica is
No,
the, yeah.
Amway was supplements,
Yes.
jewelry, makeup, just like the most random shit. And
But
it was like, hey, haven't
her
talked to you in a
husband-
year. Do you want to
the-
buy a lipstick from me so
The
I can
ice
get
cream
a
truck
point?
and the kid and the puppy and the ice cream truck.
Basically,
Yeah.
that's what that is.
But it's this is how her husband made, I mean, millions upon millions of dollars. And I have to question when a woman looks at someone and goes, you've scammed millions of people out of millions of dollars and ruined
get
their
married.
lives. You're the most fantastic person I've ever met in my life. Now, what she also did was she's also in charge of companies that collect interest, debt collection companies for student loans. It's her companies that they sell the student loans off to for debt collection. And she is now releasing the federal mandates of there is only so much that you can cap as interest. There is only so much you can collect. There has to be a certain amount of time before you turn it over to a debt collection agency. So we have the precedent that she's a shady bitch when it comes down to money.
Wait, so she didn't used to be in charge of this?
No.
And now she
She was
is?
appointed. Yes.
was
According
appointed.
to who?
This administration.
This administration.
This administration just up and decided, hey, let's give her some more power because she's got
Yeah, zero education.
Jesus on her
She
side,
She
I
had
guess.
no background in this. This was something that she was appointed to, and the Supreme Court.
Me helping my son with homework has given me more of a background in education than Betsy
Senate.
DeVos.
So I'm confused how she got there, how she got this extra privilege.
The president appointed her, and then the Senate confirmed her. And that's how that worked.
Ta-da! You now have a
And
wonderful job.
We can talk about this for a
All
while
day.
because she's not even the worst.
Is
no.
she that chick?
Is she that chick?
How do I-
Which one are we going to talk about
How do
today?
I?
She's the one that said that she
Jenna's
felt.
too nice for this shit.
Yeah,
not
she's
truly
like
a
I don't.
bitch
She's
yet.
the one that
We'll get her into bitch territory soon.
She actually
Hold
like
on.
milked people hate me so much that she brought armed guards with her to schools when she was speaking at them. She had like armed
She got
security
kicked
with her.
out when she first started trying to visit schools
Yeah.
on her first
But
tour
she
through.
felt so threatened by a bunch of fifth graders that she had to have armed Secret Service with her when she would go to elementary school.
Oh, she was also the one
wow.
who defended having guns in schools in case grizzly bears attacked.
She was the Grizzly Bears once. And I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, Sarah Palin.
How often does this happen? No, seriously.
That would be a very good
Let's
question
Google
to
it.
ask Betsy if she could
I
do
can say
that.
a deer, but a
that's
grizzly
who
bear.
Betsy DeVos is,
right.
I guess.
Now, what we're worried about with her is she's in charge of the block grants. And if we turn around and allow...
Wait. What's that?
Block grants are the money that they give to states and schools and shit.
So
for.
it's just a lump of money goes to one
You
state.
get a pool every year.
Yeah.
And they
then
figure out how to
state
break it up
Breaks it up.
by state.
Interesting. Okay.
If she's so into religion that we're afraid if she's like, okay, we can now give this to religious education, she's going to take the portion of the bulk of it and allocate it to religious schooling.
Mm-hmm.
And then whatever's kind of left over we can do for those, secular folk who are just burning in hell. And, those are who we pray for on a Sunday morning.
Okay, so
when
if
we're giving
this
10% of our
ruling-
income to the church.
So if this ruling is what passed or not passed?
Not yet. We will be hearing arguments on the 22nd of January.
We haven't heard anything.
No.
Yet. We just know
The
what happened and why
Montana
it's
Supreme
there.
Court called the provision unconstitutional,
Yes, they
nixed it.
Yeah.
So the precedent so far has been that the state Supreme Court has said that you're right. The way that this is set up is not constitutional. We're nixing it, and no one can use it now because it clearly was opening doors we didn't want opened.
Right.
So now they're moving to the Supreme Court.
And then if it opens those doors, then we're on a whole new ball game.
Yeah.
And so that's why it's all down to this one case. Like it's not like it's.
Yeah.
And this what?
Is yeah. This is why the Supreme Court is so important.
This is we can't pray in school, so now let's try the books, and now we can't do the books, so let's try the money.
It's a game.
It's a game.
I hate games.
It's chess. And where I find the sympathy is, I'm a parent. And I'm, even moving down to Texas, I'm like, I have to find the best school system, and I want my kid to have the best education. These parents turned around and said, I think this is exactly the education that would be perfect for my child. They were then told, yes. Go ahead, use the money. Nope. I'd be pissed. I'd be like, oh, hell no. You mean you know how long it takes to research a goddamn school? Months.
They were told that they could use the money by who?
It was
by the program.
The program was like, here, use this money for your school. And then after
the program, the federal aided program?
Yes.
Okay. Said you can use this for this religious school.
The state-funded program that was giving money.
State-funded, I see.
Said, sure, use this for the school, for your kid.
Even though that doesn't normally happen?
No, not with religious education. No, it doesn't.
No. So then they backtracked and they're like, oh, wait, we have a Blaine Amendment in our state constitution, which prohibits us, all of this stuff. And so they're like, okay, we can't give money to religious schools as the state. Right. So never mind, you can't use them for religious schools. And these three parents
were like, wait a second.
About to do that.
No, this was right in the
right.
Oh my
But I feel like I can't even be mad at the parents for bringing this court case because in truth, I probably would too.
I would too.
You promised me, you hyped me up for this. I got excited for my kid.
And y'all said it was okay.
Yeah, especially if the kids' friends are going to school there. You're like, you're going to school with your friends, and then you watch your kids' friggin' heartbreak.
So this is interesting
because
I know I have a lot of people who do send their kids to religious schools because they do have a lot more money, and the classes that are important are better kept and better,
and
updated textbooks and have really good teachers and all that.
Right.
And so they're like, hey, secular kids, just do that extra class, do whatever you want.
Right.
Just comply.
Right.
And so, what do we do?
Yeah, because this is interesting because this case is not like a black and white. This isn't like as far as I know, part of the Project Blitz, right?
I don't think it's part of Project Blitz.
I doubt it is unless they're funding it in some way.
I just think it was parents that got pissed off. Yeah.
So Project Blitz is going to be a whole other topic that we're going to delve into.
That's going to be a really good.
That's going to be so good. But basically, it is a bunch of Christian lobbyists and organizations that are very well funded that are coordinating attacks on First Amendment rights with the explicit intention of limiting the rights of non-religious
I need subtitles. I need to read this. What?
We're going to have a running scroll for Jenna. Soon.
Can you just say that one more time?
Sure. So there are Christian organizations and lobby groups that are very well funded, very rich, and they are coordinating across the country to work with politicians that they have in their pocket to pass legislation that's things like have In God We Trust in schools, things that right now are like tier 1. They've got 3 tiers of like their game plan.
I know abortion is top tier.
Their goal is to disenfranchise LGBTQ people, prohibit abortion and women's health care, and disenfranchise anybody who is not a Christian. Right. And that is explicitly stated in their goals. And it's a coordinated effort.
It's actually a mission statement that they call it. Yeah.
Or like there's no boundary against super extremist, religious, like extremist lobbyists?
No.
because money is free speech.
Yeah, money's free speech. And you can fund and get funding from whatever the hell you want. We can do a whole other episode on that.
So basically, we're a country that just really likes rich people.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah, that's, yep.
And we like this.
And we don't like it, but the people that make the laws like it.
Because they get the money.
That's why I always say.
The show is just us breaking Jenna's spirit. I feel really
Jenna
bad
has
now.
lost all hope in humanity.
All right, want to hear a good story? Let's hear a hopeful story and a positive way that we can start
Do we have one here?
Yes. We have a positive fucking story.
Do we actually fucking have one when dealing with shit like this?
Yesterday.
Ooh.
Yesterday being January 4th. January 4th, Patheos published an article, School Places the Satanic Temple's 7 Tenets in Classroom.
I love it.
Yes!
The children ran an Oxford-style debate for or against the 10 Commandments and the 7 Tenets. And the children voted anonymously to place the Satanic Temple's tenets up on their school walls.
What school district and what state was this?
This is Cambridge, Massachusetts.
The students of Cambridge, Massachusetts, we salute you.
Yeah.
7th graders.
Seventh graders.
And we salute anybody who
in
had
7th
a part
grade.
in influencing these kids. We salute that whole county.
I've got to hand it to their parents because let me tell you, I wasn't this put together in 7th grade. I was just like, what lipstick am I wearing today that looks horrible?
So let's talk about why we're happy about this, because I know that my family watching this right now would freak out and think that I actually am the devil and a devil worshiper. So let's clarify why we actually think this is a good thing, even though we're not Satanists.
No. Right. So here's the reason it's good. The Satanic Temple is an organization that is specifically founded to combat the religious overreach in government.
Right.
So what they would do is if a religious group was lobbying to have a 10 Commandments statue on public property, they would also lobby to have a statue of Baphomet on the public property. And then that would force people to look at all religion, not just Christian ones.
To be fair,
not even theist ones, because Satanists, the majority of them, at least the ones that are being activists right now, are atheistic.
But there is a sect of Satanism that takes this as a religion.
But just to be very, very clear, this does not mean that we worship Satan.
No. In fact, here are the 7 fundamental tenets. I have them here. These are what the students voted for as opposed to the 10 Commandments, which we all kind of know.
I have like butterflies in my heart
if you don't know them,
if you don't know them, good for
Google
you.
it.
Don't Google it. You don't need to know that shit. The 7 fundamental tenets. 1 should strive to act with compassion and empathy towards all creatures in accordance with reason. The struggle for justice is an ongoing and necessary pursuit that should prevail over laws and institutions. One's body is inviolable, subject to one's own will alone. The freedoms of others should be respected, including the freedom to offend. To willingly and unjustly encroach upon the freedoms of another is to forego one's own.
Which is why we do what we do.
Exactly. Beliefs should conform to one's best scientific understanding of the world. One should take care never to distort scientific facts to fit one's beliefs. People are fallible. If one makes a mistake, one should do one's best to rectify it and resolve any harm that might have been caused.
Woo! I like that one.
We could use a little bit of that in the atheist community sometimes too, you know?
It's fair. And the last one, every tenet is a guiding principle designed to inspire nobility in action and thought. The spirit of compassion, wisdom, and justice should always prevail over the written or spoken word.
I'm keeping this. I think I'm going to frame this and put it in my kitchen.
Right.
So I think we need to provide links for posters.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Absolutely.
For sure.
I think we should start selling them here at the ACA.
Yeah.
Coordinate with the Satanic Temple.
I mean, if you just drop the name, like for all those black and white thinkers, like if you just drop the satanic border and all that, just read the middle, the rules, and just read those. What do you think? You know?
And to me, that I'm like, why wasn't this shit the 10 Commandments? Like, this is just like be
so
a good,
much better.
And this is what you get. The Bible, it's a great story on how to be a good person. You got to now. Remember, I'm Catholic, so we go by that Old Testament shit.
You were Catholic.
I was Catholic. I was Catholic.
Okay.
Much too many people praying for me to still be there. I am not. But we followed the Old Testament. It was you had to see a wrathful God to see a forgiving God. And I'm just like, and it's a great story about being a good person. I'm like, why the fuck are we not following that?
Right, exactly.
Because that's pretty much what it says. Don't be a dick.
There have been atheist people who have like brought this to their religious people, not tell them like what it's from, and they agreed 100%.
Yeah, they're like, this is great.
Guess what? Guess what, you guys? You're Satanists.
Because that's pretty much saying don't be a dick. Your ability to swing your fist ends at my nose.
It's little tests like that.
I love those.
That like those. Let's bring this to my priest and see what he says.
Right.
Those honest to God, honest to fucking Peter Pan, true tests that those are what expose religion to people like us.
Yeah.
And that's why we keep talking about the same shit over and over and over again, is because like what we said earlier is, if you just hear it in just a little bit of a different way.
Yeah.
It makes people think.
It made each one of us stop and think.
If you're going to come in with already a conscious bias, you're going to slam down for it.
Yeah, it's hard to break
I would
that.
love to actually bring that to my old church. Because we had more of like really young liberal priests that were just like, be good people.
Just be good people.
Are you still in touch with them?
No, I have actually been taken off the rolls for the Catholic Church.
I wonder why.
Off the rolls?
Yes.
What roles did you have?
They put you on rolls to say this is who we have as membership, and it's a.
They showed this to you?
I knew about it as who's part of the congregation, and with the Catholic Church, there's like a set of standards and guidelines. You just can't walk in and be like, I don't believe in God anymore. Fucking take me off. They won't do it.
Right. Right.
So it's been said I had an abortion. So I actually brought the medical records with me and was like,
take me off.
Please don't use my name anymore. Thank you.
That's interesting.
Thank you.
I was told by someone in my family that in order for them to be consciously allowed to attend my wedding, because it wasn't a Catholic wedding, it was a Christian wedding, but it wasn't Catholic. Mm-hmm. They said that I had to go to the bishop and get him to sign off on me not being a Catholic anymore.
That's what I had to do. Yeah.
And I was like, you know what? I would do that, but on principle, I won't. Because I don't have to get permission. That's the whole fucking point of this, is I don't have to get permission.
Right.
I am my own boss, Sorry, back to the
No,
point.
it's fine. That was the one thing I was happy to ask permission for from the Catholic Church was take me the fuck off this shit.
Yeah. So there's something I want to bring up as we talk about, how to fix this as little people, right? I went out to my hometown. I don't know if y'all all know, I grew up kind of in the Bible Belt. And I went out there to visit an old friend and went to the taco shop in town. And there was a little girl there at a picnic table. And she had, I don't know if y'all know, the Chick Tracts.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. So for those who don't know, my experience with Chick Tracts, and they'll tell you what they actually are. In high school, I was learning Spanish and I had to translate something from Spanish to English. And I found a Chick Tract because there's a lot of times there's a Spanish version available.
Yes.
And so I wanted to do that for my homework assignment. And I was a Catholic, and this one was called the Death Cookie. And it talked about how communion is the death cookie, and it's going to take you to the devil and blah, 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 blah.
No.
And I went to my dad crying. And I was like, why would somebody say that?
Well,
and I was just confused.
It is kind of akin to cannibalism, so I can kind of understand.
It was just so dark and scary, and it was black and purple, and had the scary illustrations.
Yeah. Oh yeah, Chick Tracts are notoriously frightening.
So I went and showed it to my dad, and he was like, you know what? Some people just don't want you to be here. And I was like,
oh my God.
So how old were you? High school, so
still.
Oh, that's a bummer.
Who says that shit to the
but
kids?
he was, but he meant it from a place that he was trying to warn me, about people. He was trying to prepare me because the world is big and scary.
Yep.
But it's if you don't prepare your kids.
Right, and
that's
this
what makes it big and scary. And so basically back to the story, this little girl has this Chick Tract, and I'm thinking back, and I'm an atheist now, and I'm like, oh shit, where did she get that? Yeah. So I asked her where she got it, and she's like, the lunch lady gave it to me and my friends.
Oh my God, I'd be making moves to have that bitch fired so goddamn fast.
Yeah, that's not okay.
So basically, this kind of brings us to what we can do. So I did some research, and I found out that I could go to ffrf.org, which is freedomfromreligion.org, and it's basically a site that handles lawsuits against any kind of organization that's crossing lines when it comes to freedom from religion.
Right.
Yeah.
Religion versus government.
FFRF has actually gotten involved with other Supreme Court cases as well.
Oh, yeah. Actually, at the last American Atheist Convention, they had a panel of people who they had helped sue different religious organizations.
That have been brought to a SCOTUS level, yeah.
Right.
So, so that's my...
Yeah, definitely. Ask questions, access FFRF.
Yeah.
It's there for you as a resource if you are concerned.
Right.
And then that's also, the whole point. Like all of these cases, all of this precedent that we've been discussing, this court case right now, these are all instigated by individuals, right?
Mm-hmm.
These are all people who say, I see a problem and I'm going to raise awareness about it.
Exactly.
And I'm going to take it to my local, my federal government.
It starts at state government,
right?
Which then keeps going along.
No, it starts with us.
Well, no, we're saying that when they do bring the cases, it starts at the state. And
well, I mean, you're totally right. But the reason I say that is because, I mean, this is why we're doing this show.
Right.
Right? It's because it starts with the little people. Because even if you don't have the
Jen's
ability.
an actual little bit.
Well, we're all pretty little, actually.
I'm 4'10", okay? We're not going to get into this.
But even if you don't have the ability to go to the town hall meetings, or you don't have the ability to, whatever, all that you have to do at least is just start talking about it.
Yes.
And when it's interesting when I'm talking to people about how I'm on this new show and it's called Godless Bitches, and I get that reaction, and and I'm like, well, but the whole point is that we're taking back this this slanderous name that's been slapped on us and saying, you know what, you call us a godless bitch, that's fucking fine. This is how godless bitches talk.
And we've been called way worse.
Right? Like, we have discussion. We're respectful in general.
Right.
So
every once in a while, there's some people that,
anybody can do this. Anybody can get together with friends and talk about serious stuff. And
anybody can be a godless bitch.
Butterfly effect. Yeah.
I love it. I love that.
And it brings out the isolation.
Yeah,
that
it's more community building.
Religion. And I've been doing this forever. I had my 16-year-old cousin literally didn't know that my previous marriage was legal because she was really convinced it wasn't because I wasn't married in a church. And it's okay, so we need to bring you out of this isolation.
Right.
And just even sitting talking about it, you guys, I wasn't really raised like that, but the two of you were. And just sitting talking about it, you start to learn. And you're like, wait, this is fucked up. And then it's like, wait, you mean I can do something? You never know who you're talking to. You never know who you're going to spark. You never know who's going to...
Exactly. And share your experience because you never know who can learn from just a little tiny piece of it.
Right.
Hey, so what I did was I ended up brushing my teeth before my shower, like, you just never know.
That actually happened. Like, I had, a bunch of friends that were like, I brushed my teeth in the shower. And I'm like, let me try this shit. Holy shit, this is magical.
It's just whatever. I'm just saying. Now we're going to have a whole thing about brushing teeth in showers.
Things,
I love this.
Other things you can do, and this is kind of something that I thought of it as a parent. My kid, they don't have textbooks anymore, but they bring home Amazon forest levels of fucking paper worksheets every day. And I go through every one of them because I'm what is my kid learning? And we had the issue where he was doing something for Martin Luther King Day and they were teaching him to say colored people.
Oh no.
Wow.
And I held it together for my kid and I'm like, I know this is what the school's saying and I know this is what you're being taught, but this is why we don't call people of color colored people.
Oh, jeez.
And then I went up to the school and collectively lost my shit. And I actually had the argument with his former teacher of, well, I'm not comfortable calling them black people. And I'm like, are you uncomfortable being called a white person? No. But it's,
I know plenty of white people who are uncomfortable being called a white person.
But he also came home one day and was starting to say mammy. And this was being taught in the schools, like the traditional black mammy mother, grandmother.
My God.
So watch what your kids are fucking bringing home. Watch what they're writing, what they're being taught, especially about world leaders, because this is where it starts. When you come from very small towns, they will say shit like colored people for black leaders.
Well, yeah.
And that's where it starts. That's where that...
Because you're in the South, right?
Yeah.
This is just old South shit that just hasn't been weeded out yet.
But this is how we continue the line of thinking.
Right. This is how we get it weeded out.
Right.
You send your kid to school, but that doesn't mean that you don't have a say in what they're learning and how they're being taught. It's not something that's been taken off of your plate necessarily.
No,
it's something that you still have a responsibility to your kids to be invested in.
And
especially if it's public school.
They also put club flyers in between the papers. And then you could see if they're hosting religious groups on school grounds during school hours. pay attention to every piece of paper your kid brings home. Look at what they're writing. Look at what they're talking about. Go up to the classroom, see what the shit on the wall says. See the books that are available.
Now, this is interesting, and I don't know if this is going to be a whole new rabbit hole or not, but when it comes to consent with your kids and their stuff and monitoring what they're doing versus invading their privacy, where's that line?
I just like to keep up on his work, but in my house, we have our bedrooms, and if your bedroom door is closed, your bedroom door is closed. It's very much kind of like this is my son's job, is to go to school. And I'm kind of like his boss. So I'm just like, you know what? I just want to make sure you're doing your fucking work, dude. I don't want to see the notes that you pass back and forth to your friends.
I see. Just ask him for it.
Right.
And let me see what your teacher's handing out to you.
They have a red folder that they bring home every day. And the parents have to go through it, and some things you have to return to school. So it makes it much easier to, as far as this personal shit, I'm like,
it's not like go through she's not saying go through your kid's lunchbox. I'm not saying and every single pocket of his...
they're writing some diary shit. No, don't do that. Your child is their own fucking person. Give them their autonomy. But look and see what they're being taught.
Right. Read the textbook.
Read the text and say something. I've walked up to my child's school and every year when we have the open house, I need to know where you stand on teaching religious education and religious ideas in your classroom. I say it every year.
So did you discuss that with your kid?
We have. My son's autistic, so it's approaching it very differently because he's very black and white, and it's either logic or it's not.
Okay.
So when we have brought up religion, I do tell him, some people believe that this happens, and this is what they believe. And until they're encroaching on you or they're pushing on you, respect it.
Right.
I don't believe in this. If this is something you want to research, I will help you out as best I can. If I can't, we'll go see fucking clergy members and, ask the questions.
Well, do you tell him, like, when he's going through his schoolwork, hey, pay attention to this, pay attention to that, or do you just not say anything?
I don't want to push my kid too much. So if if he's struggling in a certain area, I'm like, we're going to sit down with this. But if he's doing well and I can see that he's comprehending what's going on, I kind of let it be.
Okay.
But like when it comes down to, he physically wrote colored. I was like, no, we're sitting down. And we're sitting down. No, I was like, you brought this shit home to the wrong mother. No.
Well, good for you.
Yeah,
good for you for saying something, because a lot of people would just, either withdraw their kid and go to a different school or just complain to the other parents or, and just not really do anything about it. So that's huge.
No, that's where they slip it in. Pay attention to what your kids are bringing home if you have kids in the school system. If you don't have kids in the school system, there's town halls and shit.
Right?
Look where the money's going.
Local town hall meetings, school board, district meetings. Just be aware of who is being elected in your town, in your city, in your state, and be available to cast a vote when you can.
Right.
Yeah.
And I also believe that schools have to show their funding every year. Like
where
on
and
paper.
how?
I believe you might
like
have
a
to ask
newsletter or
districts.
something? Or?
You may have to ask the districts, can I have a report of your funding for the year?
So maybe that's something to ask about.
Yeah.
Right. Figure out where the money's coming from, where it's going to.
Yeah.
If they're donating money to Chick-fil-A.
Well, if they're receiving money.
Okay.
Because
receiving, I see.
Donating is one thing. But when you're getting money from somebody, you're a little bit more inclined to push their agenda.
Well, I think you would if you're donating to, too, right?
Well, donations from, I don't know if schools
donate?
donate.
They do fundraisers that are done by the kids that they can donate the money to.
School.
I see. Each school can individually do it because holy shit, if I got to buy any more fucking cookie dough at fucking $35 for 8 fucking cookies, I'm done. Seriously.
Right,
like
it's
I
the most
can't.
expensive cookie dough.
I don't fucking get it. I'm like, what the fuck do you need cereal boxes tops for? What the fuck are we doing? It's like a pop top donation thing, and I'm like, well, fuck, that's a good cause. I mean, fuck it, we'll do that. And that's how we ate Captain Crunch for a solid fucking month in my house. Another thing you could do is, I know at least where we're from, my kid brings home a folder every day with the work that he's done. Go through the worksheets. Go through the pamphlets, the tiny little school club pamphlets that, come in. Read what your kids are especially in English language arts, read what they're studying, read what they're writing to see if something may border on the, I don't know if we should be teaching this.
The books that they're reading, that they're being assigned to read.
They don't do books anymore with us. It's computerized and then they do printouts.
Well, but I mean, like you could look up online, sparknotes.com, and look whatever they're reading, whether it's online or actually tactile, you can look up the SparkNotes and figure out what kind of book is this? Like, is this manipulative? Is this factual.
Right.
You know, what is this?
Especially with now that we can kind of freely use language between creationism and evolution, especially in the South.
Right, exactly.
Pay attention to what your kids are bringing home. Look in between the papers for the little flyers for the clubs that come home to see if schools are being hosting religious groups on grounds during school hours, all that.
Mm-hmm. Research where your school funding is coming from and going to. And then kind of make sure that you just know what's going on. Attend school board meetings, attend town halls.
A lot of districts have district town halls to kind of go over the funding for the year and, you know, what the curriculum's going to be. Attend those. Ask questions. Hey, what is this? What does this class have? This looks a little bit, you say mythology. What fucking mythology are we covering here? Right. You know? Just get involved. And this is ground level. Checking your kids' shit. What is my kids doing? You know, what are they doing? Go to the district meetings.
Right. And if you see something that's really wrong and rubs you the wrong way, do some research. Reach out to FFRF, the Freedom from Religion Foundation. Mm-hmm. They have lawyers who help individuals bring court cases that defend their rights. Last year at the American Atheist Convention in Cincinnati, they had a panel of people that they had helped to bring court cases to, I believe it was the Supreme Court, to defend the separation of church and state. So all of this past precedent, everything that has been stopped in its tracks so far, is the result of individuals standing up and saying, I don't feel good about this, don't do this.
This is a little shady right.
So that's also something you can do. That is a tool you are free to use.
Yep.
And in the meantime, keep watching.
Yep.
We will be here every month to talk with you and to keep you updated on what's going on.
Bring you more stories to complete you get totally pissed off and want to get out and do something. That's our jobs here, ladies.
Yep.
You know, folks, that's our jobs.
So thank you so much for watching. We will be back with an episode on the anti-vax movement.
Yes, and that's going to be a very angry Jen one. So
tune in. In the meantime,
don't just sit and bitch.
Get up and do something.